Okay, so this is ORMAP training, and we're going to be talking about the ArcGIS parcel fabric, and that's really the main topic here. Again, as I started introducing before, this is really informal. Stop me, tell me anything. I will talk forever. If no one stops me, I will just keep talking and talking and talking. So please make sure you stop and interrupt, have comments, have questions. If you don't want to talk right away, you can put them in the chat window, but it's going to be informal. We're going to try to make this as informal as possible. As I mentioned, you've got 16 hours of me here. Use me. Try to figure out. Let me go and tell you a little bit about who I am. I'm going to ask you to tell me who you are so I can kind of figure out where to go and focus some of this training. I am the owner of Panda Consulting. We are an ESRI Silver business partner, have been for 27 years. We are parcel people. That's all we do is parcels everywhere. We are beta testers for all their software. Matter of fact, I've been using Esri software for so long. I was a beta tester on ArcView 1 when they went from Workstation to what they called the thematic mapper, which was the first version of ArcView out there. So we've been testing their software since then and applying it. I am a professional land surveyor in 2 states. I'm a land surveyor in Florida, which is where I live, and in South Carolina. So those of you that know about the history of the rectangular survey system in the United States, Florida is a PLSS state. South Carolina is one of the original colonies. They are a meets and bounds or colonial state. So I get a little bit of each. As I mentioned, I've taught previously at local college. I am a past president of the Florida Association of Cadastral Mappers, which is as close as you get to ORMAP. They are property assessors mappers organization. I've also been on the Florida Board of Professional Surveyors and Mappers for 10 years, and that's the regulatory board for surveyors. So I'm kind of a platypus. I'm a little bit of each. And like I said, I've been very involved with ESRI for a long, long time. Again, this training is parcel fabric, nothing else. I'm not going to talk about what Dean and the other people have done for your annotation. I'm going to talk about the parcel fabric, what it means, what it does, what it can do and what it can't do, little nuances on it. That's what I'm really focusing on here. You have questions about Pro, we can answer a lot of those, but please make sure that you have questions. All right, so let me find out who you are and what you do. So in the order in which you came on here, well, Scott, why don't you tell me who you are, who you work for, and what you do?
I'm Scott Branchfield, Lincoln County cartographic supervisor, and this is my 3rd attempt at taking this class. Last February, I got the first 2 days, and then I got sick, and then I was going to take it in September, and then you had to reschedule, and I couldn't make that class. So hopefully, I'm going to make it through all 4 days this time.
Good. Hopefully you've got a lot of the sort of fundamental though. We've already covered that, and sorry it's going to be a repeat, but yeah,
that's okay. I can
right.
use the review.
All right. Craig.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Craig Graham. I am the cadastral cartography tech for Jefferson County here in Oregon. I wear a lot of hats in what I do. I help with our tax maps. I process deeds. I am fairly familiar with ArcPro, so I'm excited to see how we can implement the parcel fabric with Pro.
How big is Josephine County
Jefferson County.
or Jefferson. Sorry, it's listed here as Josephine, but yeah, how big
Oh.
is Jefferson?
Oh, you're gonna put me on the spot.
Is it
Uh,
30,000 parcels? Is it 300,000
I
parcels?
want to say about 25,000 parcels, perhaps.
Okay.
In that neighborhood.
And are you the only one there?
No, I've got another gentleman. We work together.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, you should have lots of questions. So
Mhm.
good. Gabe, why don't you introduce yourself? Thank you.
I'm Gabe Snodgrass. I'm the cartographer in Josephine County, and we are transitioning into ARC Pro. So we've been going through some training and trying to get through that. We're in ArcMap right now, and we have about 42,000 parcels in our county.
And how much have you worked with ArcGIS Pro yet?
Very little. We've had a couple of training classes that we've taken. We're doing all our stuff in ArcMap. I had to go through, we have a annual submission to the Department of Revenue, and I did all of that in Pro this year, which was cool for me, but I would say very little. I mean, not enough where I feel comfortable to, go full bore into, producing maps and doing what we're supposed to be doing.
So I'm going to share with you, Panda Consulting has a contract here in Florida in which every 6 months we go and collect every single parcel in the state of Florida, together with every single tax roll record for the state of Florida. And then we go and normalize them, standardize them, and submit them to the water management districts down here who control all the water resources, and they use them for permitting and other things. But so we collected 10 million parcels, assemble them all, put them together, standardize them, and send them back out again. I still used ArcMap for it because I haven't converted all of my Python or all of my models to ArcGIS Pro. So
Interesting.
yeah,
Good to
but
know.
but we know that the time is coming. It's going to have to be soon. So
Well, it was simpler using Pro, even though I don't really not proficient at it yet. It was simpler.
it
Lot of
is. There's a lot of really nice things they built in, and you'll hear me
Yeah.
talking about them. Yeah. Good. Thank you. Thank you, Gabe. Jeffrey.
Hello. Whoa. Turn on. Is that better? My name's Jeff. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got it. We did get an echo there
Okay.
for a minute, but
And I was hired about 10 years ago by Josephine County to work exclusively on ORMAP. So that's all I've really done is ORMAP. I'm starting to learn the cartography field now, but primarily I've just done ORMAP. So I know.
good. Thank you. Summer?
Good morning. Can you hear me, everybody?
Yes.
Okay, good. I work with Scott. Scott's my supervisor here in Lincoln County. I took this class in September because I'm brand new at all this, so I'm still in that learning curve. And I am not at all proficient in Arc Pro, so I have a lot to learn yet. But I'm new at cartography. I have a planning background, so I'm looking forward to this and getting better at it. So
Good. And finally, Erica.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry, I'm using a new laptop. I am Erica Wild. I'm with Klamath County. I am the cartographer and doing the analyst job right now as well. We're completely in ArcMap. I've taken a few the ORMAP Esri provided training in Arc Pro, and I am editing a little bit in Arc Pro, some of our other layers. And yeah, so I'm just here to learn more.
Okay, good. As I think I said earlier, I'm going to ask for forgiveness up front here. Those of you that have been through this before know I am not a cartographer. I am not a cartographer. So I'm a data person. And so I often will say things that I may not be as gentle, right? Especially when we're talking about annotation. I personally don't like anno, but I'll try to be gentle when I talk about anno and versus labels. And we'll move forward with that. Okay. So let's look at this. So our schedule right now, this is our meeting today, and we are going to be meeting from 8 a.m. Pacific time to noon. Tomorrow we're going to be meeting the same time. Next Tuesday, it's the 20th, same time, and then a week from tomorrow, same time. This is the Zoom invite. If you're all here, obviously you've gotten this information, so you're able to get here. This Zoom invite does not change ever. So this is actually to a virtual room that we use exclusively for our training. So anytime you want, during these times, and at least 15 minutes before and even 15 minutes after, this room is available if you want to go and talk about something. All right. The daily schedule, all of the material is available here with this link, and the QR code also is here. These are the actual training materials we're going to use. It's a PDF file. If I actually open up that folder, it's actually the training folder here, and it has all of the materials, including some backups from previous recordings. If you're really interested, we have all the previous recordings, all the previous trainings. The recordings are all there, including, you'll see the transcripts from them and the actual video recordings on here. As I go in here, there's some sample documents. This T7 4v2.03, that is ORMAP's data. And inside of there, you will see a fabric and a geodatabase. If you double click on the fabric, this is the parcel fabric we're using. And I have actually opened up a new project file. Just to let you know the data there, I've actually disabled some of the attributes rules that is in there, only because we're not going to use the project file that's set up previously. We're going to use this one here. If you're going to use it and open it up, because it's stored in Dropbox, it actually will become a conflict sync because I have it open actively right now. So copy it to your local machine and then go and use it from there.
Frank?
Yes.
We downloaded it last week. So does that mean we have to go back and download this also?
No, there's a couple things that when we actually start going and showing things, I'll show you what I've changed on there. But for the most part, you'll be fine. Yeah, you'll be fine.
Okay.
The way we're going to work is that every day, first 2 hours are going to be review of what we've done up to that point, new materials, some demonstrations. Then after that, we're going to take a 30-minute break, sort of give us a rest, because I know listening to me for 30 minutes is a little intense, and I want to give you a break from that. And then we're going to come back and do a final hour and a half, and we're going to work on some examples, question and answer sessions. My expectations from you is that every day from today forward, tomorrow when we go, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each of you to tell me two things that you learned previously. All right, this is homework, for lack of a better term. Two things. The only rules are you can't tell me something that somebody else did. And while there's 8 of us, which means there's got to be 16 different things. So if you're aware of it, it's better to go early than it is to wait until the very end, because hopefully I teach you more than 16 things in one time. But yeah, so at the beginning, definitely you're going to have to talk. I need you to talk. And then at the end here, after our 30-minute break, I want you to come back and have questions. I want you to have comments and things that we can talk about, because part of that final hour and a half is just going to be talking through some of this a little bit better. I want to make sure that I can transfer this knowledge and it's meaningful. It's not just, oh, we heard that once and we don't know what it means. No. Ask questions, please. I don't want to be a teacher. I want to be a guide. I want to be the one that helps you understand this. All right. General topic overview. All right. First thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about ArcGIS Pro 2.x versus Pro 3.0. Is anyone still looking to go and deploy 2.x? Or are we all on 3.x? Now's the time you should be talking.
Yeah, we're on 3.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, we started this originally when we first started, and that we were just at that point where it was getting over to 3. And the question was, well, should I go to 2 or should I go to 3? The odds are right now, it should almost always be at 3, but we'll talk about it more, what the differences are. And there are a couple big differences. And then we're going to look at defining what the parcel fabric. What is this thing, the parcel fabric? Instructions on how, for how the parcel fabric works. Defining what a record is. A record is critical to a parcel fabric, creating one, modifying records, defining what features are included in a record, processing a record for a subdivision. Then we're going to work at sort of workflows, merging things and splitting things and splitting them by aliquot or by meets and bounds descriptions, and distributing overages and adjusting and working with control points, and then final map production, including cartographic elements. Dean will probably handle some of that towards the end, and that's going to be our last day, looking at what's out there and what they've done. Anything else you want me to add? Now's the time. If you've got something specific that you're aware of that I haven't listed on here. Does anybody have anything specific they want to talk about?
I do, Frank. Good
Yes, sir,
morning.
Dean. Yes, sir, Dean.
And Frank, once again, thank you so much. This is one heck of an opportunity. I so appreciate you helping ORMAP out. And this is class, Frank's the guy. So this is a great time to ask questions. So I would like to get, if there's time, and is to look at a little bit at validation. One of the issues that I've got 3 different validations that I'm currently looking at. And as we move into production, giving the cartographers rules to make sure, or tools to make sure things are good. There's the topology validation, which I think I'm okay on with the inspector. Then there's a validation tool that rule that Amir wrote for us, which is show me tax lots that aren't in a record, which is also kind of cool. But I'm having a real hard time finding how to set up if a feature attribute is in the correct domain. And we produce a lot of data for the state, which requires us to tweak our data sets to meet state standards and to meet their domains. A typical one is I have a domain that is for township. Township has to be between 1 and 99, or 1 and whatever. County has to be 1 and 36. But other things like line type has a very specific list. And if you don't have the correct line type, I need to know. And I know that you can do some of that with an attribute by clicking on the attribute and say, show me the ones that don't. But I would really like to go through the validation rules, because I like inspector. And I'm kind of shocked to be saying that, but I've been playing around with that for a few days. And I think this could give the cartographers some interesting stuff. And I'd like to add those as examples to the tools data set that we provide folks. But it's not working well. So I'd like to hit on that at some point.
Thank you, Dean, because that was one of the things I was looking at, because the data set, and you and I have been through this a couple times before, the data set that we use actually has a lot of errors in it, a lot of things that don't meet the rules. And I wanted to go through and show you what they are, what you should be looking for, those sorts of things on there. And as I said, I'm brutally honest. I'm going to be honest. And by the way, Dean and I have had lots of agreements, lots of disagreements about how to approach certain things, what's important, what's not important, those sorts of things. And anyway, we're going to go and look at that. Anybody else have anything else besides that?
I'm assuming that part of the process is annotation. Annotation was something we've been playing with a little bit and haven't. It's been like following features hasn't been as clean as it was for ArcMap for us, and being able to flip it if it's the wrong direction, that sort of thing. So hopefully we'll be doing some of that in this process also.
So on here, as it relates to annotation, annotation is not part of the parcel fabric. All right. It is not part of the parcel fabric. But I'm more than happy to share my opinion on it. I'm also going to go and show you options from annotation, but ORMAP has done some really nice things with Anno, but I am not an Anno expert, but I can show you some of what's happened and where to do it. I can share this, and I know this is completely irrelevant to ORMAP. We have a couple of procedures or processes that we sort of recommend for our clients that have Anno. Anno is very problematic when you start looking at web services and editing them, depending upon how large you get. Small counties really don't have much problems with it, but larger counties, and we deal with everything from 100,000 parcels to one of our clients. Several of our clients have over 400,000 parcels, and we communicate often with Harris County. It's got 1.5 million parcels in it, and how you handle dimensional annotation on there. And we'll do with it. We are going to cover Anno, and like I said, Dean has done a lot of work, and ORMAP has done a lot of work with Anno as it relates to producing maps in Pro. But we'll talk about that a little bit more. But thank you. Thank you.
And Gabe, I did figure out how to flip. So when we get to that point, I can show you what I've learned, and then Frank can correct what I'm doing wrong. So that'll be great. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Yep. All right. Anybody else? Okay. All right. So the first thing is ArcGIS Pro 2.x versus ArcGIS Pro 3.x. So by the way, we have been dealing with ArcGIS Pro since 1.1. That's how early we've started working with it. We've been working with it now for over 8 years. Some of the earlier versions, and 2.x to 3.x was the biggest leap because it was a internal structural change. So that if you go and have 2.x on your machine and somebody else has a 3.x machine, there are different internal structures for that. So that because of these different structures, the project file, the APRX, the map layout, styles, layouts, geodatabases, annotation, and all, they are different. So if you have somebody open up and create a geodatabase with a project file in 3.x, someone with 2.x cannot open it. It is not backward compatible. It's only forward compatible. So just as a warning, if you are in a homogeneous type of organization where you have a lot of different versions of it, stay at 2.x, not at 3.x. Because once it's opened in 3, it cannot be opened in 2 again. Internally, they store these things differently. All new functionality is being developed in 3. 3 is where you should be at the moment. Here's sort of a link over to their help page on migrating from 2.x to 3.x. It's not as critical now, especially since most of you are using 3. But there's also internally, there's labeling updates that occur inside of 3. They've taken the label expression, and we're going to tear that thing apart. And they made some really nice changes to it. 3.x is where it is sort of the sweet spot and where we're at right now. To let you know, and let's talk about Anno here before we move any further. What has happened is that the annotation that works in ORMAP has a certain structure. When they looked at developing ArcGIS Pro, they looked at the annotation structure and they said, this is not sufficient for what we want to do inside of Pro. So they changed the structure. They went and added actually 2 attribute fields to the structure. Because of that, once the annotation is upgraded from ArcMap to the Pro structure, it is not ever going to be read in ArcMap again. Never. We've experimented, tried. So can we export it out to ArcMap compatible? No, you can't. Can you go and just strip out those 2 attribute fields? No, you can't. It just cannot be read anymore. So if you have ArcMap annotation, just know if you're going to upgrade it and start experimenting with it in Pro, make a copy of it. Make a copy of it, upgrade that copy, experiment with it, test out what it's like to edit and such. But just know that not backward compatible. Once you upgrade it to ArcGIS Pro, you can never read it in ArcMap again. And I'm going to go and give you another nuance on that. Between ArcGIS Pro 2 and ArcGIS Pro 3, there's another structural change in annotation. So there's another upgrade that has to happen between 2 and 3. And again, once you upgrade it to 3, you can't go back. You cannot go back. Just to warn you, those are very important. And I've had too many clients say, oh, they should have warned us. And we're trying to warn you. Again, if you work in the heterogeneous, environment, stay at 2. If you work homogeneous, go into 3. All right. Let's talk about the structure of the parcel fabric. This is a data model of the parcel fabric and what it, structurally what it looks like. So the parcel fabric itself right here is an actual bit of code. It's what Azure calls a controller data set. And this bit of code, when it's activated, will go and do a whole bunch of things for you. And we're going to go through a lot of them. But it's all focused on a relationship that's built between lines and polygons and points to a record. A record is the controlling factor inside of the parcel fabric. You must have a record. Everything relates to a record. It takes a while when you're dealing with the parcel fabric to sort of fully embrace what this means. What this means is that a parcel, by the way, a parcel is defined as the polygon, the lines that are unique to it, and the points that are on the ends of those lines. That's a parcel. All of those combined. So when we say, for example, select a parcel, you can select the polygon and it will know intuitively, oh, it's also the lines and it's also the points that are unique to it. It's all of those things. So that's a parcel. The interesting thing within the parcel fabric, and again, this is sort of a nuance, is that these lines are not related to the polygons. The lines are related to the record. The polygon is related to the record, and the points are related to the record. Normally, when we think of parcel mapping, we know, oh, this line goes with this polygon. No more. The lines and everything, the lines, the polygons, the points go with records. A record is a polygon feature class that's an organizing structure. It's intending to be a reflection of a transaction, something that caused a change in your data. It is, for want of a better word, a record of that change. All right, that's what it is. Now, the record has connection lines. These connection lines are lines that don't define the boundaries, but are used for structural purposes, such as from a point of commencement to a point of beginning in a meets and bounds description. That's a connection line. Doesn't define the boundary, but it defines where something is. Meander lines. These are not defining the boundary, but they're defining the geometry of that parcel. Those are connection lines inside of here. And you can find very creative ways to use connection lines inside the parcel fabric. Lines, these are the boundary lines of them, and they all relate to parcel types in here. So the lines are defining the boundary of that parcel. Polygons define the areas inside that parcel, and it all relates to parcel types. You can have multiple parcel types. Part of the design of the parcel fabric is to go and analyze what types of parcels you go and maintain and what types of information you have about them and fit them into this structure. The structure is actually very flexible, but there are certain things that you have to have. Inside of a parcel fabric, you always have records, you always have connection lines, you always have points, and you have parcel types that have lines and polygons associated with them. Also, there's a series of checks on here. There are topology rules, standard topology rules that come with the parcel fabric. And these are very important for how this works. There's also attribute rules. This has to do not with the geometry, but with the attribution of your parcel types. You go and create those attribute rules. And then there's errors when in fact there's problems with those. This is what Dean was talking about. These things and the validation, they are tricky. I'm going to tell you now, you will not use Esri's standard topology fixes all the time on here because it's not aware enough of the parcel fabric to know that it has to do it a certain way. So when you're going and doing topology validation and fixing them, sometimes you'll use a standard fix, sometimes you won't. Same way with attribute rules. There's a couple of different types of attribute rules on here. This is all very schematic. It's tough for people to figure out what's going on here. But if you remember that, in fact, the parcel fabric, all right, it's a controller object. It has code in it. And that code, when it sees an active record, it will go and do certain things. And it will go and impact lines, points, polygons, and other lines of the things that it's keeping track of. These rules, these are validated and they come off a different way, and we'll talk about that more. Any questions or right now? We're actually going to start looking at this to help you understand. All right, I'm going to go to Pro right now. And inside of Pro, I have a parcel fabric here. This is a parcel fabric which is the ORMAP sample parcel fabric on here. By the way, I have my own configuration. I'm not using the ORMAP configuration. I'm using one that's focused more on the actual parcel fabric data itself rather than annotation and all this other stuff. This is just parcel fabric data on here. You will see in the table of contents that we have up here, this is a parcel fabric records group, and it has basically the records on here. We're going to explore them a whole lot. It has topology and all of our rules in here. If you look inside of here, here it is here. It has anchor points because I've done an adjustment on here. It has regular points. These points are set up as far as whether they are fixed or control, whether they are standard points or whether they're retired, and then shows us whether there's some others that we have out here that are nothing. I'm going to again remind you, I can talk. I can talk for a long time. Back in the 1980s, I was a keynote speaker at Chicago Title, and I actually talked for 8 hours straight, breaks in between, but 8 hours straight. So I used to use that as punishment for my son when he didn't do something right. I said, I'm going to make you listen to me for a long time. So I could talk. Interrupt me. If you have a thought, if you have a question, stop me. I will
So
keep
Frank,
rambling. Yes. Go.
so you mentioned fixed or control points. So are they equal? So a fixed point and a control point are the same thing?
No, they are not. They have different characteristics about them, and they are set up through attribution. The fixed point actually has a rule on it that says you may not move this point. This is now fully constrained. So let's go in here and look at that real quickly. And let's go and do it this way. Let's go get the field definition for points. All right, so on here, on the points feature class, there's a name, but there's a field here called isFixed. The isFixed field defines whether or not the geographic location of that point is fixed, all right, or whether it can be moved around. That's the primary differentiator between a regular point and a fixed point or a control point, all right, whether or not it's turned yes or no. This is a Boolean operand. Yes or no, it's fixed. And then there's further refinements on it, such as, can it be adjusted? Is there an adjustment constraint that can get applied to this? That's a further refinement on it. Yes, you can adjust certain components of it, but not others. And then finally, whether or not you want to preserve all the values in here, X, Y, and Z. So there's 3 fields that define a fixed point, a control point on here. So if we go and find a fixed point here, let's go and look at here. This is a fixed point. If we go and look at this, this is a fixed point here. It says that this is not going to be moved. All right. And it's got X, Y, and Z are free and Z is constrained, but this is fixed. This is a control point. It's not intending to be moved. Let me go and turn on my editor. And if I go and select that and say, let's move that. And by the way, I should tell you, right now, I'm working on data that I am not familiar with. So it normally should be that if I go and try to move that, that will not move, that will not allow me to move. Unfortunately, because this is set to free and no preserve, that is moving. So by default, normally that would not be able to be moved. That would be fully constrained and said you can't move this thing. A normal fixed point works like that. Obviously, this was just brought in as a fixed and then never set here on this one. we should say it's all constrained. All right, and let's go and save this. And save this out. Now let's try and move it. Again, if I go and try to move that over to here, it's still not moving it, preserving it. So one more thing here. Do it over here where it's easier. Yeah, a whole bunch of preserve that. All right, that should now be preserved. All right, it's constrained. And let's save this out. By the way, this is some of what Dean was talking about as far as falling outside of domains. You've got things that domains that are set that are not being complied with. Now let's go and see if we can move this now. And it should, still not doing it. Again, this is data I'm not comfortable with. I don't know what's going on here. XYZ, this should be constrained. We'll have to look at that. There's other things in here. There are attribute rules on the points that says to preserve, in which it's, oh, this is disabled. Yeah, sorry. This is data that not, so if I enable this and I try to move it, it won't let me move it if in fact that's set, okay? So a control point fully configured is not supposed to be moved. It's not supposed to ever move from where it is. So yeah, so that's what it's control points. The go ahead.
Yeah, Scott, there's a couple issues that we've run into with conversions, and I ran into this with Gabe down south and a couple others, and that is that what you put in the points feature class really gets into how you think about your map control. And a lot of times, like for poke, when we originally set ours up, is I put our control or corners feature class from ArcMap into the points layer and set them all to be don't move, preserve. And what I've run into since then is that the corners or control points that we have in ArcMap are more like guidelines, and they're not always connected directly to the network. So one of the things that we've played around with is actually making a feature class called corners or control or map corners or whatever. And that's where all your ArcMap stuff goes. Then you build everything. And then as your control, as you review your control with remapping and likewise, you move it from that cartographic control into your fabric control where it has an impact on things like least squares adjustments and the like. So you've got options there. And I think Frank is hitting that pretty hard with the look, you have decisions you have to make. And looking back on it, now that we're in production, Christy is looking, our cartographer is looking at it going, yeah, I wish I would have done that. But it's a little late in our production process. So something you should consider when you're converting your data across, how are your corners really controlled, or are they cartographic features to help you with the map review process? So just some things to look at and to confuse the issue. Thanks, Frank.
So, but that brings up a really good point. And because as you're going through the migration into the parcel fabric, just be aware there is no single way to do it all. This is extremely flexible. You have a lot of options, and it really comes down to knowing the data that you're going to be bringing in. You want to make sure that you're aware of both the strengths and the weaknesses of your data, and you can actually design this system to work the way you want it to work. I have some clients that their control points are like Dean was just talking about. They are in a different feature class some of them in a separate parcel fabric that the surveyors go and control versus the cartographers, so that the surveyors keep track of the control points and where all the monuments are, and then they allow the cartographers to use those as reference points. So again, it comes down to the fact that you can design this completely different on here. But the intent is you have the ability to set certain points, and these are intending to never move. These are control points. These are things that will control things on here. Thank you. Good point, though. And I know hopefully I didn't confuse people by going down on that tangent, but yes, it is what you can bring from this is that the parcel fabric design is very flexible. You can put things in, you can leave things out. There's all sorts of components on here. Let's keep going down through the table of contents. Links. These links and anchor points are basically associated with adjusting things. And these are temporary feature classes. They are normally stored in the default geodatabase. And you probably, when you first bring this parcel fabric in, you will not even see those. They're only come into the table of contents when you go and do a transform align parcels. Yeah, those are the only two that you need them for. And then every single time you do that function, it wipes out that data, that feature class. It cleans it out every time. They are temporary in nature. Points, construction line or connection lines. These are in fact these lines that are used to go and define boundaries, or excuse me, not used for boundaries, used for defining geometry or spatial location. And then we get into a parcel type. In this case, we'll look at tax parcels. And there are the lines and the polygons associated with them. When you bring a parcel fabric in, it will automatically recognize you have a parcel fabric, you have parcel types, and split them up for you, including putting definition queries against them. Because the lines are separated against whether or not they are current lines, meaning there's no value in the retired by record, or whether they are historic lines, meaning there is a value in your attribute field called retired by record. So again, these lines go to records. The records will tell you whether or not they are current or historic on here. So we have a line feature class and a polygon feature class for every parcel type on here. Let's go through this a little bit more. Tell me if I get too deep. Tell me if you want me to go and stop and just look at this. I want to look at this structure that's in here. So the parcel fabric in a table or in the ARC catalog version, you can differentiate the parcel fabric because it's a blue icon. Everything else is gray. The parcel fabric is blue. It is different. It is unique. It is a controller object. It literally is nothing more than a bunch of code on there. There are no features associated with it. It's just an object. If we look at the properties of this parcel fabric, it will tell us things such as where's it located, what's the databases it's in, what is the name of it. If we pull down and expose the parcel fabric component, it will tell us when it was created. This was created in 2020. And this is a version number 5. There have now been 5 different versions of the parcel fabric. Know which version you're working with because they have different feature classes. They have different ways that they're working and such. And I've got a slide on that. What are the compatible ArcGIS Pro releases? This will work with 2.9, 3.0, 3.1, and 3.2 with release 5. Release 5 has been very stable, and they envision using this for maybe even one more release of the enterprise. And it's compatible with Enterprise releases 11.9.1, or excuse me, 10.9.1, 11.0, 11.1, 11.2. All right. Is anyone here thinking about going to 11.2 for the parcel fabric? No? No? Okay. Just be aware that 11.2 is still pretty new, and there's a bug that was found in 11.2 that has to do with the clip command. So you might want to hold off on 11.2. Last modified, whether or not topology is enabled. Again, maximum numbers for build and validation and such. Here's the real gist of it. The parcel types. What types of parcels are we going to go and include inside of our parcel fabric? Tax lots, condos, subdivisions, and tax codes. And you'll see them over here in the list. You'll see each of those. I'll go over those. Parcel types. Yeah, that's all I need on here. And then the feature classes that are in here. Here's the records. Here's the feature classes, the tax lot polygons, tax lot lines on here and such. So in here, if I look at our catalog, I see a whole bunch of things listed. For the condo parcel type, we have condo polygons and condo lines that defines them. And we saw over here, they have definition queries set against them. So here's Rosetta Stone number 2. If you are sharing your data with someone else and they ask you for a copy of the data, if you send them a feature class out of the geodatabase, it's going to include current and historic data in there. So you need to have a definition query against it to say, I'm only going to send you the current parcels, not the historic parcels on there. Just be aware of that. Inside the parcel fabric, there's a further filter definition query set against them. And then let's go down and show more. So we have relationship classes. So we have the record is related to the condo polygon and it's related to the condo lines. The record has connection lines. It has lot polygons and lot lines, subdivision polygons, subdivision lines. So it has a series of relationship classes for every single parcel type that's related to the parcel fabric. That's how it maintains the relationships. It's a long time getting here, but we're going to get there. All right. So sort of bring this all together at the end. Subdivision poly, subdivision line, tax code poly, tax code lines. Here's annotation in here. Here's tax code points. Tax lot polys and lines on here. There's adjustment lines. These have to do with parcel fabric least squares adjustments. It's optional, not necessary, but it's included inside of the version 5 structure. Here's the parcel fabric points feature class. That's the one over here. Here's the parcel fabric records feature class. That's the one up here. And then here's the parcel fabric topology. Let's look at topology as it's defined standard out of the parcel fabric. So if I go to the properties of this topology, it has what are the feature classes that are shown inside of the parcel fabric. It has subdivisions, polygons, lot lines, connection lines. It has points. It has tax lot polygons, condo lines, tax lots, and the rules. This is the important part. So for every parcel type that you define inside of your parcel fabric, you wind up with six rules. The first rule says the lines that I'm tracking have to have points on the ends of them. The points are used for adjustments, moving things around and such. They are mostly considered handles, except when they are control points. One of the interesting things I observe is when I go around, I can see whether or not someone has pulled ArcMap skills over, or whether they're fully embracing the parcel fabric, whether or not they show their points while they're editing. I can tell you, I can recommend for you, always display points. They are very important for you. Always display your points feature class. Then we get into the line feature class, and there's 4 topology rules for the lines. They can't have dangles. All right, you cannot have dangles on your lines at all. They can't. That they must not self-overlap. They must not self-intersect. They must be covered by the boundary of a polygon. This is important. The lines that are associated with that parcel type have to be on the boundary of the polygon. So you cannot have freestanding lines here. The only type of freestanding line that you can have is a connection line. So if it's not associated with the boundary, it should be a connection line or temporary construction line that's not part of the parcel fabric. So the last one is the lines have to be on the boundary of the polygon. And then, as it relates to the polygon of that parcel type, it has to have lines on it. Those are the critical 6 rules, and I'll show you how it works now. Normally at this point, somebody asks me a question. I'll wait. Can you add your own? Yes, you can. Is it worth it? Probably not. Can you delete these? No, you cannot. You have to have them in there for the parcel fabric. All right, so how does this thing work? There is this thing called a record. A record is a polygon. Actually, if I open up this feature class here, I can see that this has polygon features in it. All right, if I actually turn it on here, I hopefully will see a polygon feature class here. That's what this thing is, 743, if I remember correctly. And it will tell me, how many parcels are associated with that record. They all relate back to that record. And if I go here, and let's go here, every record should have parcels associated with it, and it should be defined as being a record of a transaction. Now, this is interesting the way this parcel fabric is designed, because if I remember correctly, and Dean, you can correct me, the record is defined to relate to a tax map index. Is that correct?
In the conversion, that's what we decided. It does not have to be that way.
Yeah.
The idea that we did it that way is so that there wouldn't be any errors, because every feature has to be associated with a record. And the idea that we had was that your map, when you came from ArcMap, represents your record. It represents your best estimate of all the features that are on the map. So the only issue with that is that in the and you don't have to do that. That's how we've done the conversion. Other folks have done it differently. The only issue you run into is that you have tax lot lines that are on the border between 2 maps, and they're going to go with one or the other. So if you look at the records associated with a tax lot line, sometimes they're there and sometimes nothing's there because they're with the other record. So that's the disadvantage. And on, you know, in all our discussions with Esri, they've never come up with a different solution, such as having duplicate lines, one for each record. But it's just where it's
Yeah,
at.
there's actually, and I'm going to talk about that, Dean. Thank you. There's different ways in which these lines relate, because they relate to records, they don't relate to parcels. All right. So how does this work? I have right here what's called a heads-up display. This heads-up display denotes for me that I have a parcel fabric in this map document, in this map I have here. I know if I have a heads-up display, it's a parcel fabric. If I don't have a heads-up display, it's not a parcel fabric, and I can't go and interact with it. Before we go in here, let me go and show you what not to do when you're loading a parcel fabric. Okay, if I go over here, here's my database. This is my feature data set. We've been ingrained in ArcMap that when we want to load all of this data up, all we do is we right click on this and say, add it to a new map document, or we drag it over. And it goes and loads it all in there, loads all the annotation and everything else in here. Well, what do I not see here? I do not see a heads-up display, because if I load my data that way, ArcGIS Pro does not recognize that I have a parcel fabric here. It goes and says, oh, you've got all these individual unique feature classes that are not related to one another at all. So that all of these lines, all of these are put in place on the table contents according to the geometry, not the way they relate to one another. No, never do it that way. Instead, if you want to go and load a parcel fabric into a map inside a Pro, you go to the parcel fabric object, go and say, add it to a new map document, and load the object in. The object will then go and load everything that's related to it, and you will wind up with a heads-up display. You will wind up with your table of contents being all sorted according to the parcel types. I can tell you 80% of the clients, they immediately, as soon as I give them the first prototype, they drag the feature data set in and say something's wrong with it. It's not working. What's wrong with it? It's because it was loaded incorrectly. Do not load it in by just dragging the feature data set in. You have to load it in by loading the parcel fabric controller object. All right. So let's go back to here, and let's see, where am I at here? Okay. So let's talk about the parcel fabric and what does it really do. This is the heads-up display, and in this heads-up display, it's a way that you can control your records. Now, there's an alternate way. I have the parcel records workflow tab on the ribbon, which over here has records. I can tell it to create records. I can tell it to manage records. I can do this other. This heads-up display is so much more efficient on there. So I'm going to create a record and show you how this works. Create a record right now. There are no unique fields or nothing that's required as part of this attribution. This attribution is part of your overall design. What information do you want to manage about a record? In this case, it automatically goes and timestamps it. Who did it? Who did it? Because it's got to be something there. And I'm just going to call this is demo one. Demo one. All right. There is a domain that's available to you that you can design. It's optional, In that domain, you can tell it what type of record this is and what type of action are you doing. There's usually a lot of discussion when you're designing this. How are you going to do this? Do you go and call these according to the types of documents they are, according to the types of things that you're doing? Is this a combine? Is this a type? Is this a plat? What is this? That really is part of the overall design. Again, it's about knowing your data and what it is. And it's about how do you think you're going to retrieve this on here? And then what's the date? Again, none of this is required. It's only got to have some sort of attribution in this name field. And I'm just going to create one. Now, what this does is as soon as I have an active record here, Parcel Fabric will start listening to all of the feature classes that are associated with it. So if I go in here and say, I want to create a line, I want to do a tax line. All right. And I create that tax line. Let me go in here. Again, let me do it this way. Okay. There's a tax line on there. If I look at the attribution of that tax line, I will see that amongst the other fields on here, there is one called created by record. Created by record is automatically populated if I have an active record. And it's using the global ID of this polygon that it's building right now. So this is the Parcel Fabric is building a record polygon, and that global ID that's assigned to that record polygon, it's assigning to every line that I create on here. If I have an existing line that I delete, it takes that global ID and puts it in the retired by record here. So if I were to delete that line, it would become retired by this record. So as I'm doing this, let's go in here and create some more lines now. I have all these lines. They all, if I go in here and select them, unselect this, if I look at the attributes again, they all go to all of them so I can see what's consistent. They all have that exact same created by record on them. One of the tools in my heads-up display allows me to say, show me everything that's related to my record right here. So I can say, show me everything, and it goes and selects all of the lines that have the same global ID on the created by record. So it's a way to quickly go and figure out what's related to this, what's not related to this. So that's the way in which this relationship works. So as I create things with an active record, it automatically is populating the created by record field and filling in the global ID. Okay, so how do we use this to an advantage? Well, if I'm building a parcel, I want to know next, once I create all my lines, does this parcel close? Are those lines, do they form a closed polygon? And that's a function called create seeds. This function, this tool, analyzes the lines that are part of my current or active record and determines whether or not they form a closed polygon. If it does, it actually creates a little polygon, an indicator polygon called a seed. And so that's the beginning of a polygon here. So if I go and say, create my seeds, there's my seed, and it shows me, oh, that's a closed polygon. If I go in here and take lines, again, I still have that active record, so all of these lines are going to be associated with it. and I purposely don't close that, and I say create seeds, it's going to tell me up here, the lines in the map extent don't form a valid closed loop. If I go in here and fix this, and say create seeds, it will go and create a seed, indicating to me these lines are good for creating polygons. I then tell it to build this. Now, what the build really does is the build analyzes all of the features that are associated with this record, this active record, and then goes through the topology rules. That's as a reminder, let's look at the rules that are associated with tax lots. All right. First rule says every line has to have a point on the end of it. Well, when I say build, it analyzed and said the lines that are part of this record, do they have points on the end of it? No, I'm going to create points. If they were part or connected to an existing point, it would not create a new point. It's only whether or not there's a point on the end of a line. The next one, do they have dangles? It doesn't create lines if there's no dangles. It doesn't prevent a dangle, but it doesn't do anything on here. Do they have dangles? No. Self-overlap, self-intersect. Are they on the boundary? Won't do anything here. And then it says, okay, does my polygon, is it on the lines that I've defined as part of this record? If it is not, it goes and expands that seed until it matches the boundary lines that are in there. So when I say build, these two seeds will expand until they build those polygons. There they are. So now, when I go over here and I say select everything that's associated with this record, over here it will tell me I've got 9 points, I've got 10 lines, and I have 2 polygons. I've got 2 parcels. That's the parcel fabric. And that's the majority of the work it does. Well, let's look at this a little bit further. All right. So, by the way, before I stop, let me stop here. Questions, comments. Is this a cool thing or what? It will help you. So, any questions? Okay. So let's look at a different thing here. Let's actually, instead of building lines, let's go and take a polygon. Again, I still have an active record. Again, to verify it, if I go and say select everything, it will select these things that I created before. The points, the lines, the polygons, but I have 3 polygons now. In this case, I have this new one. When I say build, what's going to happen? It's going to go through those topology rules and say, do my lines have points on the end of them? I don't have lines there yet. Is my points, are my lines self-overlapping, self-intersecting? No, I don't have points yet. Do I have a polygon? Yes. Is that polygon covered by lines? No. It's going to build lines for me. And then those lines, it's going to build points on those ends of the lines. So when I click on build, it goes and creates the things that are missing. All right. So this can be done by building lines and then checking that they're closed and then making sure that the seed is there and the seed gets expanded. Or it can be done by having polygons and then telling it to finish building what's left here on here. Questions yet? Okay. let's go and do this again. And let's just create another record just to demo 2. I don't care what that is. So I'm tracking another demo. This time I'm going to go and create lines. Oh, you know what? I'm going to go and deactivate that just so I can show you that, yeah, I've got lines there and I went and created them. So let's activate this again and say create seeds. It's going to, oh, nope, nope, nope. Your lines that are associated with this record do not form a closed polygon. Well, yeah, I have lines. But if I go in here and say, show me the lines associated with this record, that's not associated with the record. It's not going to create a seed. If that's the case, I can go in here and I can select that line. Let me unselect the polygon, select that line, and I can say, well, this time assign that line to the record. And just to show you before I do it, if I go in here and say, here is a created by record, no value in there. When I say assign this to the record, it will then go and add that value in there. So now that line is associated with the record. Now, when I tell it to create the seed, it will create it and we can build it. Questions yet? Kind of get how this works? It's looking to see whether the record has everything it needs to build a polygon, to build a parcel. A parcel is the polygon, the lines associated with it, and the points that are unique to it. That's a parcel. Okay, well, do I have to go and have these all closed on here? Again, those lines are all connected to this record. Do they have to be closed on here? If I create seeds now, goes and creates them all. It looks at whether or not these lines that are associated with the record are closed upon themselves, not whether they have dangles, because these have dangles, dangle, dangle here, or whether they have connections, whether they are self-overlapping or anything. It looks at only whether they intersect. Dean.
Yeah, I've run into this and I apologize for interrupting, but I'm bad at entering traverse, as most of these folks could probably tell you. And I'll forget to close, or I've created a polygon that doesn't close. I go to make seeds, it says, you don't get to make seeds. And I go, where is it not matching? So what can I do to find the unclosed error?
I wish I could tell you that there was an easy, or that Esri has put together an easy solution to this. They have not. I can tell you what we do, okay, on this. We use a couple of tools and techniques. Let me go and select everything associated with this record and just delete it. By the way, is everybody, that's just to illustrate that the lines don't have to be end to end. As long as they intersect one another and form a closed polygon, it will create seeds, and it will create, if we were to go and build this out, it will go and build them all out as parcels.
So you don't have to planarize.
No, you don't. Well, it's a good idea to planarize sometimes. So I've gone and I deleted those features. So let me just use this same record again. And let me go and create these. All right, and let's do an easy one. And let's say that we now have we got a dividing line that's supposed to be from here to there. All right, and when I go in here and create seeds, or if I want to create seeds, creates one. It's like, no, I'm expecting two. How do I find this? The reality is there is no easy tool to do this. It's rather sort of figuring out. Couple things to remember. The seed is always placed in the middle of the envelope of all your features. So in this case, I look at this and I say, okay, there's something that hasn't closed here. So that since this is in the middle, obviously I have a closed polygon around the boundary, but there's something wrong with this line in here. I would then go in here and I would probably use the extend trim tools. Extend trim tools and say, take this line, and there's no extension there because it already fits. Or I could go here. Sorry. Go here. And like, well, if I do an extend trim here, which by the way, it will let me extend trim to here, that would form a seed. It wouldn't be exact, but it would form a seed because it probably was supposed to go there. So maybe what I want to do is use a different tool to go and intersect these. If I use the line intersection tool, it'll do two of them, not all of them. I might have to use the edit vertices tool to go and select this, and I just want the line. I don't want that. I would then go and do edit vertices and maybe move this over to here. There is no single tool to go and find gaps in here.
So would it be possible to use the topology validation to find those dangles? Because your rule says the text lot lines should not have it. And I'm again, I'm just becoming newly acquainted with validation and trying to figure some of this stuff out.
So let's do this. And I'll show you the problem with that. All right, so let's go in here. Let's go to edit. Let's go to our tax lots and go to our error inspector. All right, sorry. And on the error inspector, here's your topology that you're going to be editing. And I'm going to do the map extent here. So I'm just going to do these, and I can say, go ahead and validate this. All right. Now, I've got endpoints must be covered. All right. Yeah, I could go and take all of these. Endpoints must be covered. Endpoints must be covered. And I can go in there and fix them and say, go ahead and create those. No, never do that. You've had an hour worth of lecture, maybe an hour and a half worth of lecture. Why would I not do that? Because none of those points actually are related to that record that I just created. I'm creating more errors as I'm fixing them with this topology component on here. So I might go back and say, no, let's undo those. All right. All of those errors. Let's validate this again. Here's all my must be covered by. Here is my thing about topology. Before you run topology against a parcel fabric, it is always a good practice to build. Build will go through whether you build just my current active record or whether I build everything inside my view extent. Build will go through and put the things that are missing into the map document, and the build will correctly relate them to records. The build active relates it to this record. The build extent relates it to the underlying records. The build automatically fixes things that are missing. Okay. So let's go through here and validate again. I now have, because of the way I fixed this, it built one of my parcels, not the other. So these are all must be covered by the boundary of a polygon. Note, if I go in here and zoom in, they all actually have points associated with them because the build automatically put points at the ends of those lines. All right. So let me go through here again and say, well, let's create seeds and then build. In this case, it did this. And if I validate, they're gone.
Fine.
So, by the way, I didn't undo enough to get that gap in there. I'm sorry about that. But it would have shown that there was a gap in there. Okay. So you want to be very careful with using the topology error inspector and the fixes that are on here. The way I attempt to have people understand this is that the parcel fabric is the additive solution to topology errors. It adds the things that are missing. So if I have a line here, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to create a line. That's again part of this record. All right. I have a line that's part of that record. When I go in here and say create seeds, there's nothing here. When I say build, there's nothing here. It built the point. But now when I validate, it will give me that error. Always, if you're using topology to clean things up, first of all, go through the entire build process. Create seeds, build the records that are there, so it creates anything that's missing. You never want to use the create feature fix here inside of topology. And now I can go in here and say, okay, must not have dangles. Okay. So
How come when you
now, go ahead.
how come when you
That's good.
created seeds, it didn't create a seed for that one triangle that exists up there?
For this one here?
Yeah.
Yep, because it already had a seed in there. Now, if I had explored this more, I think on the third day, I've got a parcel here. All right, I got a parcel, this one here. There's a function called shrink to seeds. All right. Now, when I do create seeds, you can't create a seed on top of a seed. Now it will go and do that. And when I do a build, all right, now when I do validate topology, look at what happened. This is the dangle now. But the key is always make sure that you run through the entire workflow of building a parcel using the parcel fabric tools. The parcel fabric is an additive fix for the topology. All right. And I keep saying that again and again because I want to make sure you understand what that does. It adds things that are missing. And it's only that you use the topology to fix things that are not. Fix things that are there that shouldn't be there. All right. Does that help you, Dean? Can you use this? Yes, you can, but we haven't found that the juice is worth the squeeze. It's
Yeah,
just like,
that's a tough one. Again, one of the things I'm starting to play with is there is a validation rule to find dangles. I've never used it, but it's out there. So again, these are things that I've run into frequently, and I'm a sloppy cartographer at best. So dangles seem to appear a lot, and it's just very annoying to me. So no, I appreciate that it's not always obviously causing the error is mine, but trying to figure it out is difficult. And really, when you're doing my takeaway from this is where I often get it is in when I'm doing a traverse, and my traverse is an older document that may not close, is when you're doing the traverse or when you're doing a break line and the like, make sure you follow what the traverse is telling you as far as closures or not closures. Because if you get to the point where you're doing build, it's too late because you can't find the dangle. So
and we're going
again,
to talk about there's some tricks inside of the traverse to go
Yeah.
and make sure it's closed. Yeah,
and that's
definitely.
fantastic. I just
Yeah.
I just it's too bad. Wish they had to find dangles.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I wish they would have, and we'll talk about them as we go through this. All
Yeah,
right.
thanks. Appreciate
So,
it.
so an interesting thing here. All right. So if I'm going to go in here and I'm going to unselect this, I'm going to unselect this polygon. So I just have that one line there. Let's just delete that line. All right. And let's clear it out. There is not a line there, by the way. That's a polygon boundary. Polygon boundary. Polygon boundary here. Okay. So those are polygon boundaries. That is not a line. Again, I want you to understand that when you're using the parcel fabric, always, always, always just build, and make sure that it adds the things that are missing. Before you go and say, well, there's a problem here, just tell it to build the line for you. Just tell it to put the points in. All right. And again, there's two different builds. There is the build just my active record, just the things associated with it, or build everything inside my current map extent. And what it will do is it will look at every record that's inside your current extent and run through every one of those. It's part of my normal practice when I'm editing and working on things here. It's just like, okay, boom, 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 do that. Always build your extents, always build them. Interesting thing here. What is this? There's a point here. What is that? Turns out that, let me see if I can, in here. It built the point when I first went and did a build and it had that line going all the way over there. That point is still there. When I deleted the line, it did not delete that point because a point was there. I only told it to delete the line out there. So just be aware that when I delete it, there was things associated with it that I did not delete. Okay. Any questions yet? We've gone a long way into here. We looked at the topology rules in here, how they relate, deployment options. The parcel fabric can be deployed two ways, depending upon whether it's single user or multiple user. Single user, by far the easiest way to implement it. Files your database, put it out there, you're good. And then you do some sort of export or ETL over to published services. If you want multiple users, then you just have to put it in enterprise and the portal. It requires a license, a Parcel Fabric user type license, and you have to have RTS server enterprise, and you actually use web services. This is a much higher lift and more of a barrier for some people to put it in. If you already have Portal in place, you just want to make sure that you have the correct version of enterprise, and then it has to get published. Compatible versions, you can see here that this was version 1 of the Parcel Fabric, and it will work with 10.7, version 2, 3, 4, and here's 5, where we're at right now, and it will work with all of these versions of the enterprise. Terminating the Parcel Fabric. Again, I've already shown you this, right-clicking on it, going to it. The feature classes, when you first create a Parcel Fabric, this is the minimum. You will get the object, connection lines, points, records, topology, and a relationship class. From that point forward, you then go and add, okay, what are you going to put in there? What parcel types are you going to go and add? And you do that by right-clicking on the controller object, saying manage, add parcel types, and what you want to do, whether or not it's administrative boundary. I'm going to ask Dean. Dean. Sorry, he probably stepped away. There you go.
No,
Dean,
I'm sorry.
have you deployed any with administrative boundaries?
Yeah, we actually at Polk County for administrative boundaries are using tax code. And the reason for that is that we have always managed the topological relationship between our tax lot lines, map index lines, and the tax code. And I know that not all the counties do that. What we found is that by doing that, there's some interesting things that we're doing with annexations. And when you annex when you have a tax code is basically the intersection of all the taxing districts in the county. So if you take the school district, the fire district, the city limits, overlay them on top of each other, every unique least common denominator area, whatever you want to call it, is called a tax code. And for us, we have never, well, we've tracked annexations annually. And I actually have an ORMAP grant to put this together. We prototyped it out. So the idea is that what the tax code does for us by being part of the fabric is that we can track when an annex is now historical, because a historical tax code is just like a historical tax lot. And we have some other tools then for collecting all the historical and basically stacking them up in another tax code index feature class. But the reason for doing the administrative boundaries, the only time I found that to be useful is, and it is an option for counties to look at, is to make the tax code administrative. And again, the only reason for that is to take advantage of the retired by record aspect so that we know when an annexation occurred and what year and so forth.
That is the perfect answer, Dean. Because as with most things in life, there's advantages and disadvantages in the decisions that we make. Sometimes they're good, depends upon what we think is important. As I often will say, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? So here's the problem with this administrative boundaries. If you have something, a parcel type inside the parcel fabric, it requires that it have polygons and lines. So the question you first have to ask is, am I maintaining lines about the boundaries of these? If you are, then that's the first hurdle. Good. All right. The second thing is, what about the size of these components on here? I'm going to go into a tangent here, and I just want to make sure that everybody understands this. ArcGIS, as with all of Esri's products since ArcView 1, has had a component on it, and that is the spatial index. All right. A spatial index for a feature class goes and actually allows the data to go and very quickly display and find things, all right, by where it's located, not what it is, but where it's located. So the way a spatial index works is that the software on the back end goes and looks at the features that are included inside of a feature class. And it looks at the size of them, looks at the length of them, including everything inside the feature class. And what it does is it dynamically tries to develop a grid and say, okay, here's the optimum grid, considering the smallest and the biggest and the dispersion of this. Here's the optimal grid, so that if somebody comes in, and by the way, these are sort of called A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. And in the background, every single feature has a grid in which it's located. And this is dynamically created in the background for you, so that when I go in and I decide to go and turn my display on here, the first thing the software does is it goes and says, what grids are my feature classes in? So if I'm doing here, it looks at A2, B2, C3, or A3, B3. It only goes and displays those things that are inside of that grid. Same way with selecting something. When I go and I put a selection down, it says I'm located inside of B2, only select those things that are inside of B2. So it's a way for the software to go and quickly figure out and minimize the amount of effort it's going through on what it's displaying, what it's filtering. Well, the problem is when you have, as often happens with administrative boundaries, really big county boundary, and it may be a tiny little administrative code boundary, the software has problems building the spatial grid. It has such a variance, such a disparity between the features that are stored in that one feature class that it begins to fail. Fail sometimes on topology validation, sometimes on just simply building the spatial index on it. And one of the things that often happens with those types of feature classes that are used for administrative boundaries is if you include them, you will begin to have problems with a spatial index. It is not, Panda Consulting does not recommend using spatial index, or does not recommend using administrative boundaries for regulatory boundaries only because of this spatial index. We did this early on with several clients, and virtually every one of them came back to us and said, we're getting too many of these errors on here. Get them out of here. Get it out of our parcel fabric. I just want to mention this. It's an option, but it ain't recommended by us.
So
Something. Go ahead.
that's a great description, Frank. And one of the things that I've had folks ask is, well, let's put the school districts in, or let's put the fire districts in. And my answer is that the tax codes are small enough, because it's the intersection of all that stuff, that the number of polygons is relatively regular. They're not in most cases, all that different in size from the map index boundary. And in that particular case, it works. And then what I've recommended to folks is that they derive the district boundaries from it. And then the district boundaries are sitting over here as independent feature classes. You have a post process that runs them and not to combine them. So thank you. I know Gabe and Justin, that was a conversation we just had last week. Or I had it with Jackson, and I apologize, but it's a conversation that I've had with more than one county is let's put the school districts in and let's put the fire districts in, and no, tax codes and then derive works very well.
Yeah, I often get, well, let's put zoning in there, and zoning has big swaths and tiny swaths. I'm like, no, that's not, it's a complete misunderstanding on there. So just be aware. And there's other things that you can do to fix that if you want. So, all right. Upgrade data set. This is upgrading the parcel fabric. You probably won't even need to do it. Loading a parcel fabric into the table of contents. Again, I showed you, always go to the parcel fabric controller object, right click on it and say add it. Never drag the feature data set in. That will not give it to you. All right. We are about 8 minutes away from our break. So let's go and see if there is something else that we can talk about or any other questions that we might have about here. I just threw a whole lot of things at you, and I know it's going to be tough, but does anybody have any comments on here or any questions that you might have about this? I often just overwhelm people. I know. It's just too much stuff thrown at you. I know. So hopefully you can see how with the parcel fabric, it helps you as a parcel mapper make sure that everything is there. It helps you just with this initial functionality of making sure that it complies with your topology definition of what a parcel is. The polygons, the lines, the points, and that they all match together. It helps you with that. We'll start exploring additional functionality as we go into this, but just that's the core of what the parcel fabric is. Once you understand that, oh, everything else starts falling in place. But the fact that you need an active record, if this is not active, it does not do anything. It's only when it's active that you can do this. By the way, another thing is I can select that parcel and I can say, activate the record. And there's my record. If I say, show me everything that's associated with that record, and then say zoom out to everything that's associated with the record, there's everything associated with that record, including all the, wow, I don't see any lines on here. We'll talk about that as we go. All right. So any questions, any comments, anything about this yet? Anybody ready for a break? After the break, I'm going to ask you to come back with questions. I want to know, I need to make sure that you understand this before we move a whole lot forward. Okay, so please come back, make sure you have questions about this. All right, I'm going to pause the recording. I'm going to turn off my webcam, going to turn off my mic, and I'll see you in a half hour from now. That's 25 minutes after the hour, and I'll see you then. All right. So we are back from our break, and first thing I wanted to do is let's Dean put a note in the chat window regarding this set of the data. Last year when we were working on this, I had pointed out that there was the tax lots here. If we open this up, that on the created by record, these should all be populated, and they are not. So that when I went and did a select on that, Dean had said, "Oh, yeah, what you have wasn't necessarily the data set may not have been updated." Yeah, there are some that have records on them, some that don't. So Dean, has this been updated somewhere, or what have you got?
You know, it really comes down to how the county does the conversion and how they want to grab it. And some counties, you know, I think right now, based on the half a dozen counties I've done in Oregon, there's about 4 different ways of creating that. And depending on what they do, the conversion examples are there for them to populate created by record if they so choose to do that. And we've got a support process within the tools committee that we can help folks do that. But those tools are there. The latest and greatest sample that I'm working on right now, which is a 3.2 version, does have those assigned.
Okay, so this one doesn't. So,
Correct.
just sort of to explain to those people who are in attendance that are just getting exposed to this. So what's the downside to this? What impact does this have? And you and I had this discussion before. I'm just sort of making sure that they have this, are comfortable with this. So on the feature classes that are part of the parcel fabric, there's a rule, an attribute rule, and it's called a validation rule, meaning it's like topology. It's not proactive, it's reactive. It goes and it gets tested and says every feature inside the parcel fabric is supposed to be related to a record. It must have a record assigned to it. And it basically uses an arcade script and says that it's an error if, in fact, the feature does not have a value on the created by record component. And that's only really triggered when you go to validate your attribute rules on here. So yes, it is an error. It's a problem with the data. How critical is that error? Not very. I mean, we have clients that go all day without it. But what does happen is you just saw me do it, in which I went and took and found a record. And on that record, I said, show me all of the lines. Show me everything that's associated with this. And I had a whole bunch of points or a whole bunch of polygons. I had no lines. None of those lines were associated with a record on here. So that's one of the downsides to it, is that if you don't have these relationships built correctly, you can't really use all the functionality of the parcel fabric. It's only for things that you do going forward. Is there a way to go and fix this? Yeah, there is. I don't know. Dean, what are you doing on here?
So in the conversion process, what I've done in the conversion process, I've actually written a little script that finds that line, every line figures out what polygons it's next to, what tax lot it's next to, and it grabs the record with the first one it finds. And that's a little script that's built into the toolbox for data conversions, and it works great. And that's a little script that I do it's about a 5-step process that can be done in a batch mode for doing it. So I typically do that up front, but Frank, that's one way to do it.
So I'm going to show you an alternate way to do it, which is the same sort of thing. I'm going to go and look at an attribute rule. Let's see here. As you can tell, I've got a lot of attribute rules here, or a lot of arcade scripts here. And I just want to see if this one works. All right. No, I don't want to use that one.
And again, those of you that are cartographers, these are essentially, you guys are gonna, or people are gonna define what it is you need to make things happen, and then working with your GIS staff as part of the conversion process, or coming up with what these attribute rules are, because ultimately attribute rules, once you get to the enterprise environment, are going to be managed, whether you turn them on or off, by your administrator. And so, and again, I'm not sure we have the expectation that cartographers are going to, although some counties, cartographers are getting up to speed in Avenue. It just depends on, time, and how much effort it's going to take to do that. But like I say, we've got examples of a lot of this stuff, and the tools committee, primarily myself in this particular case, because I seem to be our lead conversion guy, I was happy to help you answer your questions about these sorts of things.
Yeah, I'm gonna cancel out of this. I'm not gonna do this. But yeah, there's an arcade script that you can run that will just go and look for the line and look for the polygon next to it and take that polygons created by record and populate it on that line so it automatically fill it in. But again, it's one of those things that when you're building it, it's best to build it right the first time and to make sure that you avoid any issues that are going to come on in the future. All right. I asked you to come back with questions because I threw an awful lot at you. So what questions do you have about the parcel fabric?
What was the difference between lines versus connection lines? I didn't quite understand that.
Okay. So let me go in and show you. Let's create another record here. All right. And this is just a test on the record. So a connection line is a line that goes basically from let's go over here. Come on, here we go. A connection line is one that goes from a point of commencement to a point of beginning. All right. And then we go in here and we can create a text line. Yeah, so now I can create a text line here. For the remainder of my parcel. And this is a normal type of, traverse where it goes and starts and commences at one point. And traditionally, I would build this inside the parcel fabric, all right, inside of a traverse. And if I say, just show me only things that are in here, I can see that I have my connection line that goes from the point of commencement to my point of beginning. And then I go around the parcel and build that all in. And then I'll go and I would create the seed and I would create the build. And when I look at this, so the connection line is the line that goes from here to here on so it does not define the actual, doesn't define the actual boundary of the parcel, but rather it defines the spatial location. I have one connection line here. which is this thing here, and then I have my other lines on here. So it's a line that's used that is not on the boundary of the parcel. For example, another way that I might use this is to go and have a parcel, and that parcel then has a water boundary on it. All right. But it might have a meander line. What's the problem with this? Sorry, I'm using the wrong one there. Let's see. Is there something different said about your polylines being on here? Okay.
Not that I know of.
Okay. It must have been the way I did it. So the meander line or the connection line could be a meander line definition for the boundary here. All right. So then when I go and say, well, show me everything associated with this record, here's all my lines associated with it, and here's my meander line. When I say create a seed, it disregards the connection line. And when I build this, it will build it all the way out to that boundary line that I drew. So a connection line is a line that can be used to define the boundary, where it's located, and it can be used for building sort of a stronger geometry with meander lines. Now, I can share with you, as cartographers, I actually have some of my clients using connection lines for this, where they go and they say, well, this parcel goes with this. So what we traditionally call a land hook, all right? And again, there's different names for it across the country. It could be a feather, could be all sorts of things, a tie bar. Some of my clients actually use connection lines because they are in the fabric. You can go and relate them to the actual record, the document, so you know which tie bars go with which records, which go with which parcels. They use that, and they go and they just build an attribute in here and say, what type of a line is this? This could be an origin connection line. This could be a meander line. This could be a tie bar. This could be whatever you want it to be. So a connection line is just a type of line that's in the fabric, but it doesn't participate in the topology of the fabric. Okay, so it's one that you can use it to build lines inside. I have other clients that use that use connection lines to build road center lines. So again, there's lots of ways. It's just a line that can be used that doesn't have to be on the boundary of a polygon. It's a good question. Thanks, Greg. What about others? Any other questions?
So if you're creating parcels and they have a create by date in their record,
Created by
and then
record, yeah.
created by, yeah, and then a retired by record date if it's a historic parcel. So you could conceivably have a whole series of changes to a parcel. Is there a way of visualizing the changes year to year, say, of?
So on the parcel record workflow, there is in 3.2, there's a thing called a parcel lineage. All right, so on this parcel, we really don't have any historic components in here. Let's see if we actually have any historic anywhere in here. Oh, we do. So let's go to a historic parcel here. All right. So we have a let's select this parcel and only this parcel. Here's my, we select this parcel. And let's activate the record of this parcel. Again, it may not be on there. And in here, I can go and do a parcel lineage. And what the parcel lineage will do is it will use the record information stored on there to build a chart. Again, it will build a lineage chart to show what was the record that created it, what was the record that, you know, all the changes that occurred as a result of this. So here is the main record. Here's the two parcels it was split from, where it looks like these were merged together into this one. And then there are some other smaller parcels inside of here on here. So there is a lineage, a parcel lineage chart that you can go and use. This is the first iteration of this chart on here. And there's some things that we've asked them to fix a little bit more. But as far as being able to reorder these things and that sort of thing. But this is the first iteration of it, and be able to go and create this lineage as we go through. So yes, there is. All right. It's pretty new. Again, it's pretty new, but it's a nice function that you can see them starting to build out as you do that. And that's under the parcel record workflows. And once you have it selected, you can then go and select and show the lineage on there. And that goes in, that's another reason why when we created it, you saw that they really didn't have names or anything on them. You want to start putting meaningful names on your records so they could go and track and be somewhat descriptive when you start using things like parcel lineage and that sort of thing, creating lineage charts. Yeah, that's a good question. Next, any other questions? What other questions? Erica, were you able to get access to the Dropbox? Oh, hold on. If you hold down the space bar, okay.
Hi, yes, I was finally, thank you.
Good.
They had to get it for me, so.
Yeah,
but- and I
sorry
got
about
it.
that.
Yeah, no worries,
Sorry
thank you.
about that. Good, good. Do you have any questions about anything on here? Any?
Not
Say
right now,
question.
but I mean, I know I do, I just can't,
It's
you know,
overwhelming. It's overwhelming.
elaborate right
Yeah.
now.
It's a
Yeah.
little overwhelming. There's a lot of things built in. Again,
Yeah.
it's a framework to help you build your parcels better on here. Anybody else? Anything else you need to talk about before we move forward? Thank you, Dean. Those are called land hooks. Got them. Okay. All right. No other questions. I'm going to keep moving forward. I'm like a steamroller. I'll just keep moving forward. So make sure that you stop me. I used to tell my students at college, I said, throw something at me. Otherwise, I just keep going. Throw something at me. All right, functionality. We talked about the record, talked about it being primary organizing thing on here. A record, again, you want to think about, well, what am I going to name it? Am I going to put any other description on here? That sort of thing. You organize around a record. Some of my clients organize it around sort of a written request that they have to go and make a change. Others around documents. So you want to think about what a record is. It's interesting. I did a YouTube video several months ago, almost a year or so ago, in which I talked about how do you optimize records? What do you do with them? And inside the public land survey system, there's some natural things that would be records. For example, the original government township plats. done by the General Land Office. A township plat would be a record, which then means that all the township boundaries, all the section boundaries, all the second divisions, all the government lots, those would all be tied to that same township plat. Or when we think about not the federal divisions of land, but the private divisions of land, a subdivision of land, private subdivision of land, you could make the subdivision boundary, and the lots inside that boundary, or the little divisions inside that simultaneous conveyance or that subdivision, they could all be tied to one record. So you could track, where did this all come from? What was it related to? What caused me to make those changes? And then when you start talking about tax lots, what was the deed of conveyance that caused me to make a split or to make a merger or anything else? So that is a good way to start thinking about a record and what it really is and how to go and start naming them and working with them. Because it's so flexible, Esri doesn't really give you much guidance on here, what to do it. This is sort of up to you. And it's often an area where people have issues with it. You're trying to figure out how do you go and do it? What sort of record types do you have? That sort of thing. Heads up displays, this is 2.9, this is 3.0. Again, you'll find with 3.0, you've got everything you need here: create records, manage records, recently used records, record properties, select records, zoom, pan, select options, and such. So for example, I could go in here and say, well, show me the recently used records. Here's the most recently used records I have on here. And I can go and click on one, and I can say, okay, let's zoom to this record. I can then go and say, let's select everything inside of this record. So again, this organizing component allows me to very quickly go over there and figure out what changes are made as a result of this record. All right. And then you start thinking about that way about how you're going to think about your data. It's, what am I tracking? Why did I track it? What did it make me do? Now, an interesting thing about this is that it actually goes and tracks the things that we create and the things that we delete. It does not track the things that we change, because the change doesn't go and populate that created by record or that retired by record. It's only a creation or a deletion that puts anything in those values. So if I go in here and I select that point, again, so unselect that. If I select that point and decide to go and move it, all right, when I move that point, you can see it rubber banding, and when I move it, it goes and moves that. I wonder why it won't that up, but it should let me go and move that on here and move it. And as I move it, it will not make any change in the attributes of those lines or the polygons, other than maybe the area fields or the shape lanes, because it's not a dramatic change on here as it results in the way it's working as far as the parcel fabric. The parcel fabric only tracks creations and deletions of lines and polygons on there. Let's go in here and look at manage records. If I go to manage records, over here, I have a way to go and find things in here. This is a way to go and find records. Now, if you've set up your records often, when you first create it, you can go and search for an individual parcel, because it's searching through the records, and often you'll make the parcel name the record name. In this case, it's map indexes. So you could search on the individual index. You can do things such as show me all of the records inside my current map extent. Or I can do my selected records if I have my record table open and I select them. Records from the selected feature. Again, you've seen that already where I selected something. I said, show me the record that's associated with this. Records created in the last 7 days. Records created in the last 31 days. It should be the same. Or I can do a query. Show me a record that matches this query on here. Manage records is a really nice tool. With manage records, yes, Erica.
Hi, Frank, thanks. Is there a way to edit a record after it's already been created?
Yes, there's.
Okay.
I was just about to show you that.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you.
Perfect timing. Perfect timing. So if you have a record selected, and this time you can see here that it's bold, it's reflective of what I have as my active record at the moment. There are 2 places where you can actually edit. So in here, I could go over here to there's my active record. All right. I go in here and set that as my active record. Let's go back here and do the, let's set that as my active record there. And here on the heads up display, I can go to record properties. All right, on record properties, I can go in here and I can change the values on the record. So again, I can change the attributes of a record after it's been created. All right, so I can go and do that. And it tells me, by the way, how many records it created, whether or not any of them are retired, and anything else on here. And as soon as I do that here, it automatically is reflected here. Now, the reason I went over here is that I can also pull up that same thing if I right click. If you'll note, this is the same as this over here. There's many of the same things. So I can go to properties of this record and it will allow me to go and do this. So let me go and show you something kind of interesting. If I go and select a parcel, all right, I can then go and say, activate the record here. All right, so I now have, that's my new record. I can tell it to delete this parcel. Let me go in here. Let me go and pull down my edit and say, delete this parcel. Now, remember I said a parcel is defined as the polygon, the lines, and the points that are unique to that. So when I hit delete parcel, watch what happens. It goes and it deletes that polygon and the lines that were unique to that parcel polygon, but it doesn't affect anything else in here. All right. So delete parcels actually goes and understands what is related to that parcel itself, not to the record, but to that parcel. What happens if I'm going in here and playing and I want to just go and delete the whole record? I want to go and delete that. So I can go here and say, select everything associated with this record. And I can say, delete the parcels associated with this record. It does not delete the parcel, or it does not delete the record. It does not delete the record. Why not? Because a record can be associated with other parcel types. It could be related to other parcels that are not part of this one. Multiple parcels can be related to a single record, right? The only way to delete a parcel record correctly is to first delete all the features associated with it, and then go in here and delete this record here under the properties, manage records. Now I've deleted everything associated with that record. I've deleted the parcels that are built as part of it, the lines and the points, and I've deleted the record itself. These are stored in different places, so I want to make sure I do them. It reminds me to go back and talk to you about something else, something that Dean said that I wanted to make sure that we understand. So if I create a record now, okay, and then I go in here and I create some lines. All right, I'm going to create some lines. All right, I'm going to create the seed, and then I'm going to create the build. All right, I'm going to do the build. When I do this, it turns out that those lines are unique to this record. If I go in here, show me, again, show me everything that's associated with this record. I now have my 4 points, I have my 4 lines, I have my 1 polygon. Well, it turns out that in the parcel fabric, you can have, my mind just went blank. You could have shared lines, or you could have what's called overlapping lines. So let me go in here and create another record just to illustrate. And I'll call this one shared lines. Now on here, I'm going to create now shared lines. I'm going to go and create a new record, and I'm going to use snap to here, snap to here. All right. So now when I do this, when I look at everything that's part of this record, note I have these lines that are all shared, but right here, I have lines on top of lines. I have 2 lot lines. I have this one, which is part of this record, and I have this one, which is part of this record on here. I have lines on top of lines on here. Let me go and create my seeds. Let me go and build my record. Now, as it relates here, I have a shared line that's shared between 2 adjacent parcels. Within the parcel fabric, I could have either of these situations. So when Dean said earlier that because of the way there were conversions, there were some of these records that didn't have lines on the bottom of them because they had identified other lines that they were using for it. That's part of it as far as how it's built, how it's originally created. You can create these with either overlapping lines, which is what's here. Those 2 lines are overlapping. These lines are overlapping. Or you can do it with a shared line layer where you only have 1 line separating the 2. It depends upon the sequence in which it was built as far as whether or not you have them. The parcel fabric. Go ahead.
Overlapping lines is not a violation of the topology rule?
No, no, because it doesn't say that. Let's go over here and just make sure. If we look at our rules, the rules say that the lines must not self-overlap, meaning they can't come around and overlap onto themselves. They can overlap on top of other lines, but they cannot overlap upon themselves. So no, it is not a violation. Matter of fact, it's a way to provide the flexibility. Dean, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think this the coolest part for me on this is that when I've got two subdivisions that are back to back, it's great to have the duplicate lines because now I can say these lines went with those subdivisions with their correct measurements. The lines to the south, for example, with the other subdivision are related to them with their correct dimensions. So, you know, after all these years of trying to guess what some of these are, trying to replicate it with annotation, we can actually now manage it, in my view, correctly, which is
Correct.
really
Correct.
cool.
It is really nice. It's part of the design to be able to have either one of these. You can't, it doesn't force you to have just one type. And it really relates to the record because the lines, remember I said earlier on, the lines are not related to parcels. Lines are related to records. So this record, and if I go in and let's turn the records on, this record here has one line associated with it. This record here has a different line associated with it. So just to show you and give you sort of a preview of this, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to attribute these two lines. Let's start by just going and creating the COGO values on those lines. All right, let's update the COGO on those lines. Boom. All right, so I have the COGO values on those two lines. Now let's say this line, which is going north to east, so it probably goes with this one the way I built it. Let's go and let's say that line is actually 80 feet. And this line here, the one that's going with that, let's call this 75. So we can definitely see the difference between the two. All right. So on here, I can see that I have two different measurements associated with the same line. They're trying to describe, in surveyor speak, they're trying to describe the distance between the two monuments to the corners, and they have different values on them. Doesn't mean that there's a gap, doesn't mean that there's an overlap. It just means that those values, those legal values, described it as having two different values. Could have been different measuring tools, could have been a whole lot of different things. It just means it has two values, and you can record those values on there and demonstrate them. One of the really cool parts about it is that, and I'll probably show it to you next week. I don't know whether I'll get to it today, but one of the cool parts is that you can have it go and analyze the lines associated with records and pull them together. If you've got a series of lines in a straight line that's supposed to reflect the overall distance, because of the previous way you might have mapped it, you might have split those lines up. It will go and rejoin them into one straight line, solve what often is called the backlots on here. The parcel fabric allows you to do that with labels, not with Anno, but with the labels on here. So again, as Dean says, this is one of the cooler parts because you can reflect the truth as far as how this was actually described. Not necessarily how you mapped it, but how it was described. It was described as being this, the eastern line of this parcel was described as being 75 feet. The western part of this parcel was described by its legal document as being a different distance, but you can have them both stored in your data. All right. Build on that as we go through here. But yeah, that's one of the cool parts is the fact that it has this ability to have overlapping lines or shared lines. And you decide by how you build the record whether or not those lines are shared or overlapped. Okay. Manage records. We went through that already. Creating a record, modifying a record. Thank you, Erica. On here, identifying features in a record. It's all related to that same global ID of the record. Adding features to an active record. You saw me do that already, where I had something existing. I had a record here. This is a record. Oh, I'm stuck on my here. Let's get off of here. Let's get off of update Kogo. Let's go here. And let's go and activate. Oh, that is already activated. Let's go and yeah, go and activate this record. So I have a record here, and let's create a new polygon with that record. Let's go and build it out. Well, you know, that one really, it was supposed to go with this record. And again, just to illustrate, when I built it, it was that one. But you know what? I want to go and make this one part of this record. So I can go and activate this record. I can then go and take this one and assign that to this record, so that now when I say, show me everything that's associated with this record, it's here. So I can flip and change these things, what records they are assigned to. Go ahead, Dean.
Did you get all the features when you selected that? Or did you just get the polygon?
That's a good question. You see him here?
Yeah.
Yep, it got the lines and it got the points on there. So again, the parcel fabric, when you have a polygon selected, it knows it is that polygon and the lines that are unique to that polygon and the points that are unique to those lines. It does all of them. All right,
Cool.
so it's
Yeah, that's, I just
easier.
wanted to verify. And then
Yep.
one other thing, could you pop over the record properties real quick? Just open up the attributes associated with that record. So in the ORMAP design, and it may not meet your needs or not, just so you're aware, is that we added a number of attributes to a record. So the record is just a standard feature class that, you know, like all the other ones. And so we added fields so that you could, and source has a source type. It's a little different than record type. You can put comments if it's associated with a plat. The transaction ID is if you've got an ID in your A&T system for this transaction, you could put it there. If you don't like those, you can change those. But really, when you transactions and records are pretty cool, that if you haven't done it before, you can make this fit how you best works with your clerk system as well as your A&T system, and can serve as a great cross-reference to these other ways of messing with data. And as Frank showed you, these are just attributes associated with a standard feature class that you can update just like anything else. So I had to do the commercial, Frank, thanks.
Hey, I'm going to build on that, all right? Often when I show something like this, I get the question, how come some of them are yellow? And how can I move them around? And how can I change them? So it turns out, and this is Pro, ArcGIS Pro, if I go into that feature class and I say data design fields, it brings up my data designer. And this data designer works in two ways. It works either against the data source, which allows me to add an attribute field or delete one, or it works against the way it's being viewed in this map. So in this case, here's the map document, what it's going to look like. So on here, I can go in and say, well, these attribute fields that have been added, these are really important to me. I want you to put them up near the top. Let's do it right underneath the record type. And let's go and automatically go and highlight all of those. This is the highlight field. All right. And let's go ahead and, save that. And then let's save this option here. So now when I go back here, what's going on here? Is there something associated with these that I didn't know about? Maybe I just crashed Pro. And I don't do that very often. Sorry about that.
Source type has a domain.
Yeah, that shouldn't make that much difference though,
Should-
but
Shouldn't had a, it shouldn't have done that.
yeah,
You've been bad.
I did something. Like I said, this is not my data, but that's all right. By the way, I like the project recovery, and I'll talk about that in a little bit here. All right, let me go and try this again as I get in here. All right, let me get here, go to data fields, and let me go and take these and move them up here. Let me go, by the way, I can select them and hold that down and make them all. Let's see if we can save that again or whether that's saved now. So it was something. A couple other things I might want to talk about, things like, for example, the record type is a Boolean. Here, this is the recorded date. Well, I don't like seeing minutes and everything else on here, so I can actually format that date so that it's only shows up that way. All right, the number of counts and such, these are numeric. The shape length, I can format this so that it's 2 decimal places and it's got feet behind it. That's good. Shape area, I can make it as a rate. A rate will go and divide the value that's in that field by something else. And I'm telling it to divide it by 43,560, the number of square feet in an acre. And then calculating it as acres, showing it as 2 decimal places. All right, so now I go in here and save this. And when I go and display my records, when I tell it, let me start editing, sorry. When I can tell it record properties, I've got all of them highlighted. I've got them in an area. And if I look at my record date, it will actually go in. If I go in here and edit this, all right, it will only show that. It won't show the time or anything else in here. So with Pro, I can actually pretty easily configure and customize for the way I want to see my data on here. So there's my advertisement for Pro. I love Pro. I don't know what that's doing. Okay, don't send that report. Okay. All right. Adding features to an existing record, show active. This was kind of interesting, and I'll show you as we start moving forward on here that on the parcel records workflow, there is a function because old school, we used to say that we would either build a parcel in place or we would build it in space so that we would build the parcel all by itself and then move it to where it was supposed to be. That was building it in space. And or we would build it in place so we could see the context of what's underneath it. Well, with the parcel fabric, what you can do is you can go and say, well, only display what's part of my active record at the moment. So in this case, here's my shared line. When I click on show only records, it only shows me what is part of my active record at the moment. The way this works, just so you know what it's actually doing, is let me go in here, and it actually creates a definition query. And that definition query, all right, that definition query says, show me where the record is equal to the global ID of my current active record. And the retired by record is null. Often I'll have where my clients will have this set. They will have show only record set, which means there's a definition query against everything inside your table of contents. and everything is part of your parcel fabric in your table of contents. And either ArcGIS Pro will crash or they'll close it out and forget that that's what's set. And they'll open it up and they're like, oh no, where's all my parcels? Literally, I have people calling me saying, Frank, something horrible happened. My parcels were all gone. First thing I ask them is, have you got set show only active? In which case, if they do, they can turn that off. Otherwise, if it crashed, often they will have to go in and edit that definition query so that it just is reflective of what they had originally. Also, it happens fairly often, but show only active is a nice feature. There's another feature here called transparency, which allows me to go and assign a transparency against everything that's not part of this active record. And you do it by setting this value and then setting the transparency. In this case, it didn't show a whole lot, but these kind of dimmed a little bit, and it's not going to show much because of this. But the way it works is you set the scale and then you click on this button on top and it sets the transparency against it. Does the same sort of thing. You just want to be aware of it. Kind of changes the symbology of everything that's not part of that record. It's an interesting cartographic effect. Build active record or build current extent. I kind of went over this before, that the build active record looks at what features are part of your current active record. The build extent looks at all the records inside your current display and builds every one of those records again. So as you're going through this, when you're working with the parcel fabric, it's often good just to say, let's just build this. Just make sure that anything I'm missing, it's in here again. And you'll actually see that on my quick access toolbar, I actually have build extent here. I don't have build active, I have build extent. Make sure everything's there that I need on here. All right. Parcel fabric. Believe it or not, that's sort of the basis of what we're going to do from this point forward. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the tools that you use. All right. The tools that you use and whether or not or how they react when you have an active record inside your parcel fabric. All right. Before we close this out, what other comments or questions do we have about parcel fabric functionality?
Maybe it's because I'm just so new at this, but like the parcel fabric is how we like create polygons and things, but it's not part of the whole map overall. Is that correct? I'm not quite understanding how it all fits together for us when we do our daily cartographic work.
Dean, I'll let you go and answer that. I have my answer, but I'll let Dean answer it.
So I look at it is that your process of editing a map, the features on a map, are being driven by documents, deeds, surveys, plats, whatever. And what this does is just lets us associate the change that those documents are telling you to do with the specific record. And a record is the deed number. It could be the survey number. So it's just letting us collect edits to the original source materials directly. So the end result, though, is that you still have to make your map. And what we did, and it may have confused issues up front, is that when I do the conversion, especially for you guys, I say that our document at the start of conversion was the map, because we don't know where everything came from before that. So our map is our document. That's that paper map that we're starting with in Pro. So again, I just look at it is that edits that I'm going to make on a map, the only, well, not all edits, there are going to be edits you're going to make to a map that are a result of you found an error. And it's, you were just reviewing it and something didn't look right. And who knows what they did. Obviously, before you guys got there, it's probably from revenue. And you're just fixing those. But any normal change that is coming as a result of you having a document, that document, this lets you associate that document which is called a record. And then all the things associated with that is there. The cool part is then is, and what'll happen in the tools is that when you make that record, because right now that record is sitting on top of the rest of your data. So when you merge that in, and those are the tools that Frank's going to show you over the next couple of days, is it's going to retire records. So things are going to be gone. Because,
Right.
but as Scott was asking earlier this morning, how do I see that lineage? Because all of those are all built on top of each other. You now go back and say, hey, where did all this stuff come from? Why did we make those decisions that we made? And that's the cool part, is it's tying those changes and adding intelligence, if you will, to that line. So now it knows where it came from. And not only where it came from, but if there's another one under it and another one under it, you can go back through time and see all those changes of why. And that's obviously, you know, even after all this time of working with this stuff, I'm still pretty excited about it. So that's my take, Frank.
And that's a good take. That's a great take. I try to simplify it a little bit easier. And let's start with 2 sentences. It does not change you from being a cartographer. You're still a cartographer. There's still, you have to keep doing that cartography work. However, it also makes you a curator of land record information. Because what's really happening is that with a couple of little additions, it is, as Dean says, it is beginning to now go and build a history, a lineage. Where did this come from? Who did it? When did they do it? Why did they do it? What impact did it have? What else did it impact when you went and put this one deed in there? Because that's one of the things that's lost with normal cartography. We just don't get any real information about who did it, when they do it, why did they do it, who did it. It doesn't completely take away cartographic license if I use cartographic license as the ability to go and fudge things. You can still fudge things, but it's tracking the additions and subtractions and things that get impacted by it. So again, you're still going to become a cartographer, but you're also going to start building this land records component on here that can be used to go and do all sorts of things. The lineage, what's created, what was impacted by it, all of that. And you'll see as we go through here with some of the tools that it starts beginning to go and analyze your data. It starts telling you things such as, oh, this cocoa value that may have reflected a piece of anno, if you've got feature-linked anno. How was that cocoa value derived? Where did that come from? Was it something that you input? Was it something that the software created, or did it get created when you did something else to something else? So it starts to keep tracking all of these things. Where did it come from? What was it related to? Why was it done? All of those things without any real additional effort on your part. The only thing you have to do, create a record. Once you do that, everything else gets done by itself, by the software. So it starts building this very rich history, this very rich set of information about, and you'll see this as we get into a traverse, as we get into just editing and inputting lines, and there's all sorts of things that's now getting stored. If I go and create a line and do a basis of bearing, it stores that. If I build a traverse and it doesn't close, it stores that. If I have, what's the misclosure, it stores that. All that stuff now gets stored all over inside of my data. It's not just, oh, I'm producing the map. I'm doing a whole lot more without really any extra effort on my part. Good question. A good, good reason for why are we going to do this? So, all right. Yes, Erica.
Hi, Frank. Sorry, me again. Okay, so I've often wondered this. We have one township range that we're in parcel fabric in ArcMap, only one, kind of a busy township. So I just have wondered, and you're talking about this, I'm sorry if you covered it, but I sometimes get confused. So, okay, so let's say we have a replat of an old land partition and they're replatting parcel 3 or something, but I have my old record created for the original land partition. Now I'm going to create a new record for the replat. So what happens to that old record? Would that just kind of show up in the lineage? So it doesn't
let's do this. Okay. Let's do this whole thing. Again, we have lots of time here. Let's really explore this. I am going to discard all of my changes that haven't been saved yet, which are obviously, let me go and select these. Right here, let me unselect this. Let me delete these. Nope, let me go and delete the parcels on here that are associated with these. So we'll go and delete all that. Let me go and also go in here. Again, I'm doing a whole lot of things here. Great in the last 7 days. Yeah, this one, let's go and delete this record. Delete this record. Let's delete this record. Let's just clean this thing out. All of those. So we're now at the core here. And we're going to create a subdivision. And then we're going to create another subdivision on top of that subdivision. All right. And so we can see what impact all of this has. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to take these two parcels and make them a subdivision. Okay. All right. So I'm going to create a record. Again, I want to start tracking these things. If it's spelled correctly, I'd be fine. Initial subdivision. All right. This is my first subdivision. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this parcel and I'm going to take this parcel and make that the boundary of my subdivision. Well, it turns out that I can use some of these tools to help me with this. So I can say, take these two polygons and as part of my record, make them a subdivision. And I'm going to call that subdivision initial sub. All right. So now I have initial sub in here. Again, just that easily, there's my initial sub. And I'm going to take these two parcels, and I'm going to make them lots. So I'm going to unselect this. All right, I'm going to take these two parcels, and I'm going to go and duplicate them onto my lot layer. These are now duplicated onto my tax lot layer. All right, those are now lots. And those lots, this is lot 4. And this is lot 5. All right. So now I have literally a subdivision with 2 lots, my overall subdivision, lot 4, lot 5, and I have tax parcels on each of them. All right. Let me go in and see if there's any labels for the tax parcels. Doesn't look like it. All right. So I have sort of a robust subdivision now. That's sort of my overall existing structure. Let me go and build a new subdivision now. All right. And this new subdivision, I'm going to create a new parcel for it. Again, it's going to be reflective of a sub coming in. A new sub. Again, this is, I don't need to do any of this. But I'm just going to go and do a new sub. Active record, new sub. I'm going to build a new sub. I'm going to go and I'm going to go through the whole thing here so that we can do it. I'm going to use the traverse. I'm going to do a bunch of different things. I'm going to use the traverse, and this is going to be a subdivision lines that I build. I'm going to build it here. All right, I'm going to start there. I'm going to go and use a tool called ground to grid because the new subdivision has a different basis of bearing than the one I have. All right, so there is here called ground to grid. I'm going to tell it that on my subdivision, it says that due north, right? Due north is equal to this line. All right, now it will allow me to go and let's go due west 90 degrees in the 4th quadrant, which is northwest, for a distance of 200 feet. All right, when I do that, note it's off a little bit because that's due north, but that's not 90, but that's all right. I'm now going to tell it to go due north for 166 feet. Then I'm going to tell it to do due east for 200 feet. And I'm going to tell it to go south for 166 feet. With the traverse, there are a couple things. I have, sorry, here, there is options. What is my closure tolerance? In this case, I have a 1 foot closure tolerance. If it closes, if it's within 1 foot, it will automatically close like it did. And it will tell me my overall misclosure ratio. The misclosure ratio is the misclosure distance divided by the overall perimeter of my traverse. It will tell me what my calculated square footage is and whether or not there's been an adjustment on it. If it turns out that I wasn't quite sure whether that was going to close or not, I can tell it to put the asterisk, which is above the 8 key. I can tell it automatically force this thing to close. So I can use that asterisk. By the way, there's a list of all these little shortcuts in here that I'll show you where to get to. But I can tell it automatically close this thing. So it automatically goes and closes it for me. I might as well go and tell you that list right now. At the bottom of the traverse pane is a hot link. It's a hyperlink over to the help file for it. The real key, and you want to go through this, is all the way down on the bottom of this page. There's a list of shortcuts that you want to go and you want to look at. Ground to grid, data entries. Here's the quadrant bearing shortcuts. For when you have specific quadrant bearings, you can tell it whether it's the northeast, southeast, southwest, northwest. All right. And you put that at the end of your angle. Close your shortcuts. You could use this to say automatically close this thing, and it will automatically close. You can use angle shortcuts. I think I might have used one where I could tell it to make a deflection, plus or minus, go plus 90 degrees to what was in there before. I can also calculate things. So on here, I could have said that the distance on my plat is 100 plus 66 or 50 plus 66 plus 50. I can type those in and it will automatically add them for me, add them together. So I could do simple arithmetic inside the traverse grid. I can put curves in. I can tell it what's the orientation of this curve? The information I'm putting in, is it a tangent bearing? Is it a radial bearing? Is it a chord bearing? And what about the other measurements? What is the chord length? What's the delta angle? Or what's the arc length? As I put those in, and I'll build curves for you so you can see. And I can do overrides. I can say, well, the linear measurement is not the one I'm mapping. And maybe I have a measurement that says 34 yards instead of feet. It will automatically, you can tell it what those overrides are and input different values in here. When you first start on Pro, it's a good idea to just print this thing out and just have it available for you with the grid so that you can become acclimated to it. The traverse grid inside of Pro is very powerful, ultra powerful, but you kind of have to learn how to use it on here. All right. I've got a traverse in here. I've got a grid. Let me go and just see what lines do I have associated with my new record. These are the lines that are associated with here. All right. I'm done with my traverse. I don't need to do anything else on here. I can now create a seed. Make sure that my lines in my traverse close. This is what Dean was saying. Often he'll go and do that, and his traverses don't close. Put that little asterisk at the end, make sure that they close. And it will tell you how far they didn't close, but it'll make sure that your last line closes. Once you're done, I can say build this out, and it will build out my new subdivision. I can attribute it. I can say this is new sub. All right, this is new sub. Let me go here. Let me fix this as far as labels so that we see existing and new. Initial sub, new sub. All right, so now I have a new subdivision. But if I looked at here, even though I put the information that was on here, that's not aligned up correctly. That's not where it should be. I need to go and make sure that this aligns and that it fits correctly. Cartographically, you might go and rotate this and do other things. The parcel fabric has tools that allow you to go and do this. So this is called, right here, this is called alignment tool. What the alignment tool allows me to do is it goes and takes my selected record that's in my record. It takes that and allows me to go and look around it and say, what existing lines do I have? What existing everything? And it puts a tolerance up. In this case, it's 35 feet. That's probably too much. So let's reduce it to 20 feet. And then I could say, generate links on here. Before I do that, I want to go and do something. I want to go down here and see. There's two parts to this tool. Erica, you said you were using the ORMAP parcel fabric, right? there's a tool in there called the join tool. This is the join tool. And this part up at top is creating the join links. This part on the bottom, these are the line points. This is going to create the line points. Well, on here, I'm going to tell it create line points if there's a point within 10 feet of a line. Show me what that's going to look like. I'm going to tell it to show me the adjustment that happens here. And I'm going to click on generate. And what that's going to do, as I zoom in here, it's going to show me that it's going to adjust this subdivision so that it matches and aligns up perfectly with that as I go through here. So this tool allows me to go and align it and set it up, and I can tell it, again, this is an anchor point. Don't do this. I can interactively add links and delete links and do all kinds of things on here. But this is the tool that makes sure that I can fit things together because they are never going to match. A key element of this is that whatever I have selected is going to get adjusted. Okay, so if I want to adjust my new to my old, make sure that here I have my new selected. If I want to do it the other way, I could tell it to select everything else and it would adjust the old to the new. So in the ArcMap parcel fabric, you had to tell it which way. In here, this is how you do it. By what's selected gets adjusted. Okay. I now tell it to align. It goes and aligns this up. And if you note there was a little bit of movement here, it aligned those lines up. I'm now done with aligning this. Good. Okay. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to build I'm going to clip it so you can see what happens to my existing sub when I do this. So before I build the rest of the sub, I can clip it out, clean it out underneath. Now it's here that I have a couple of choices. I can tell it at the bottom here, anything that's turned on, that's editable, clip it out. All right. So in this case, I have my lots turned on. I have my subdivision turned on. I also could have tax code. I don't want to do that. But anything I have turned on that it's on top of, it's going to clip it. Boom. That's the easy way to do it, except you have to pay attention to what you're doing. The other way to do it is if I turn this option off, I have to tell it to select, okay, here's my sub, and then what do I want it to clip from? There are times when you have to do that and times when you do it this way. I'm going to do it the easy way. All right. I'm going to tell it to clip out everything that it's on top of. And you saw suddenly I have these crosshatched areas. It has now gone and taken and impacted the existing sub, the existing lots, the existing tax parcels on here. It has clipped the lines that were defining this. And if you look at this one here, let's go back and undo, and let's see, 580.57. When I clip it, it clips that dimension and says, oh, that's 380.57 for that. All right, so it's clipped out the subdivision here. This is still on the other side. This is still on the other side, but it clipped out that one for me also. So it clips out, in this case, the polygons and the lines, clipped out everything that needed to be clipped out. Okay. In this case, I can turn on my historic for my subs, historic for my lots, historic for my tax parcels. They are all there. If I click on this and select that and say, okay, what is it here? I have my historic tax lot. That now is reflecting that it was created with this ID and retired by this one. I have my historic lots, again, created and retired by. I have my subdivision here. There's my new subdivision. Here's my historic subdivision. All of them are marked by what record was active when it was created, what record was active when it was historic or retired on here. So if I turn off my historic for all of these, all right, I can now see that I have, and let's unselect this. So here's my new sub. Here's my, what's left of, let's go in here. Here's my initial, that's what's left of my initial parcel. Excuse me, my initial subdivision. That's what's left of it. That's not been impacted anymore. The new subdivision supersedes that. Got it? So it created all of that to that workflow that I just did. Dean.
And you're going to be walking through all these tools that you just showed us over the next few days, correct? This was huge. Wow.
Yeah, we're going to be going through all that. I didn't finish this sub yet. I'm going to finish this sub. All
Keep
right.
going for it.
So I still have this. This is my record. Again, it's a record of what's being changed as a result of this document. That's what you want to think about, that this is a record of what got changed. So I'm going to go in here and use a tool now called Copy Lines 2. If you were using the ArcMap parcel fabric, this used to be called Construct from Parent. This is now called Copy Lines 2. I'm going to copy lines to lots. All right. And it's going to copy them. Now, my lines, I only had selected the subdivision polygon, but it took those related lines to it and copied those lines into my lot lines, copied the seed and created a seed in the lots for this. So I'm going to go and turn off my sub so I don't get confused. I'm going to turn off my tax lots so I don't get confused. And I'm going to tell it, just show me what's here. So now when I look, I have, here's my lot lines here. Now again, because I deleted those old ones, it created my new lot lines here, and here's my lot polygons. On here, here's my other new one. So I'm going to go in here and divide these up. So I'm going to take this line, and I'm going to take one of these lines. I'm going to take the one that goes northeast. I'm going to unselect that. All right, I don't want that either. Select that. And I'm going to divide them. All right. The divide tool, the way the divide tool works now is it knows what you have selected, and it shows you the options that are just available for the selected features that you have. So if I go up here and say, let's divide what I have selected right now. Come on, there we go, divide. I have the following ability. I don't want this one. That's that one. That's north. Let's unselect that one. Okay. So here's my two. Now you'll note here it goes from the start of the line or from the end. So I can go this way and this way. I can divide it into equal parts. I can divide it into percentages. You know, when I say divide this into 2 equal parts, it will go and divide it into 2 equal parts. I could divide it by distances. And I'm just going to take this one line and do it this way to make it easier to understand. Distance. I have the ability to go and tell it 3 different options. I can tell it one single distance, or I can tell it repeating distances, or I can tell it varying distances. If I do one distance and say, okay, let's go and take 50 feet off of there, it shows me what 50 feet off is. When I go and say divide, it actually will go, let's make sure our lot lines are displaying labels. Okay. We'll actually go and divide them and show me those. However, let's go and let's turn the labels on again. All right. So that's what it is beforehand. So that's one single distance. I could tell it, no, let's do varying or let's do repeating distances. I want to do 50 feet, but I want to do it 3 times. And it shows me 50, 50, 50 from the start. And when I do that, it will go and do 50, 50, 50, and then leave me whatever is left here. And if I zoom in a little bit more, I'll be able to see it on there. Yeah, there we go. So that's another option. If I have repeating values, I can go and input those. Let's go in here and do, no, I can do this option, which is varying distances. So I can do, remember, this is 166 feet. We can do 50 feet for the first distance, hitting enter. Then I could do a 66-foot road, and then it will tell me you've got 50 feet left. I can tell it 50 feet, and I can tell it to make sure that if there's any little differences between there, you proportion them between. So I now have here 50 foot, 66 feet, and then 50 feet, and I can divide it up. Boom, there they are. I can go over here to this one, and I'll just take one of these. Only select one of these, and I will do it same way from the start, 50, 66, 50, and say, divide that up. All right, there's my divisions. I can now go and draw some right-of-way lines. I don't want this. And I can go and say here, here. And I'll show you all sorts of tricks here the next time we actually get into this tools. All right. Now, all of these lot lines here, I want to divide them all into 3 parts. You know, just I'm making pretend here. All right. Just show you some of the things that this can do. These are the ones that don't have values on them. This one, this one, this one. This is the one I don't want. Okay, because that's the one that goes with that north one. I'm going to take those 3. I don't want that lot either. And I want to go to divide. Again, this time, go back to divide. And I can divide them into, let's say, 3 parts. All right. Divide them. Let's get off of divide because it's now going to try to divide those ones I've selected. All right. Create lines. You know, I'm going to show you a trick here. This lines right now, by default, is going to continue every single time. It's going to rubber band. Well, I just want to go bink, 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 bink. So I can go over here and I can tell it on this option to not do continuous. All right, just let me go. Dink, 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 dink. All right, so that option there allows me to either rubber band it or just have discrete individual ones. All right. So I have now the lots. These are tiny lots, obviously, but I can say, okay, let's create my seeds. So at this point, it tells me, do I have closed polygons? And this is where Dean would have, maybe I didn't close this line here, and it would be one seed right here showing me, oh, that's not closed. So you didn't. So the seeds are to go and show you what's closed, what's not closed. All right. And then next step is just build this. When I click build, because I'm currently in copy lines 2, when I click build, it will build them and automatically go and turn everything else back on. All right. So now it's showing me everything. I don't have anything on here. All right. I've got my lots here. Good. Well, it turns out I need to go and number them. There is a tool called sequential numbering. With sequential numbering, I can go to not my tax lots, my lots, and tell it populate in the name field. And I can tell it here sort of a formatting, whether I want to pad it with zeros. Maybe I have more than 10 that I want to put in here. You can tell it what to actually put in here. I'm going to do it a couple different ways. Just with that, start with 1 and increment by 1, go here to here. All right, there's 1, 2, 3. Well, or I can tell it, go and pad it with that. Start at 1, increment by 1, here to here. 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3. Okay, or I could change my format and say, maybe I want this to say lot, and then do it the same way. I can do it start at 1, here to here. That's lot 1, 2, 3, and then I can go here to here. 4, 5, 6. All right, on here for me. Sequential numbering. We used to have a tool in ArcMap called Snake Pin, which was a really nice tool. I'm just enjoying myself so much. I've forgotten what time it is. All right. So one more step, and then we'll leave for the day. Now I've got to create, let's go and turn my lots on, my numbers here. I'm going to create a bunch of tax parcels now. Well, it turns out that here's my lots. Here's my 6 lots that I have selected. I want them to be tax parcels. So what I do is I duplicate them onto my tax lot. Duplicate them on here. I can now go and sequentially number my tax lots if I want to put their tax numbers in. I don't know if you have an option for roads or something in here. I don't know I'm not that familiar with your database, but so with that, I took an existing subdivision, built a new subdivision on top of it, retired that component of it that was impacted by the new subdivision, that the new subdivision had superseded, created my historic records, created my new lots using sort of geometry tools, numbered the lots, then I went and created new tax parcels on there. All of it now actually going and being related to these documents, and I'm now able to go and see, what did I create? When did I create it? Let me go and tell you one more thing. The lines that I created on here as part of this, if I go in here and look at them, it tells me that some of these I created by dividing it, and that in fact I had, let me go back to the ones that I knew I had in here. Yeah, I had that ground to grid correction. Remember, I made it so that due north was that. It actually stored that and said, oh, these lines, when they were input, you had a correction on them, so that if you try to analyze these and use them for least squares adjustments, it knows how much that the bearing that's on that line isn't really the grid bearing, it's the bearing that relates to the other, and you had to go and make an adjustment on it. So to answer the question, what is the parcel fabric doing? It's beginning to build its record of what did I do? When did I do it? How is it impacted? What changes did I have to make, or adjustment did I have to make on there? The polygons that I created, for example, my new lot polygon on here, it will tell me, in fact, whether or not there was a misclosure, whether I had a misclosure on it, what my misclosure ratio was on there. So it tells me all of that, whether or not the traverse to create that polygon was closed or not. I didn't have to do anything on that. I just did my normal tools and let the software do all the work for me. I'm going to be quiet. Real quick chance for anybody to give me any last questions, comments. Dean, you came on, so I know you want to say something.
So real quick, what you'll see here is that our design does include the plat boundary, the lot boundary, and the tax lot boundary. Those are just feature classes. They're all tied together through all the things that Frank has gone through. It's up to you to decide as your county, how do you want to use them? Do you want to just do a single feature class fabric and just do tax lots? Do you want to do all three? Our county had been doing just tax lot maintenance forever. Our cartographers looked at it and said, you know, we'd like to see the plats and the lots and manage the whole thing. That's your choice. These are just standard feature classes with additions built on, and you get to decide that. And I just think that's the coolest thing.
Any other questions or comments? Good to see you tomorrow, 8 a.m. Andrew, did you have something, or?
Yeah, I had a quick, just for some review, where was this recording going to be for us to find later?
It's actually going to be inside. It'll be on Dropbox. All right, and let's see here.
We
So-
will add that to our YouTube channel for ORMAP, so you can see this class and all the classes.
Inside of here, it will be in
Okay, thank
recordings.
you.
It will be here. And I'm going to create a new folder here, and it's going to be called February 2024. So if this is going to be on ORMAP's
Yeah,
recordings, I need to
we'll
be
eventually, but this is where to go until we get our act together and get it there. So thank you, Frank.
I'll have to be careful what I say on here. I'll remember that now. All right. So yeah. Tomorrow morning, you have homework. Each of you, 2 things that you saw today, that you learned today, that you thought were cool. Oh, I'm going to use that. Or, hey, I didn't know that before. All right. Just sort of, and I do this for a reason. I want to make sure that you begin to, that you're comprehending what we're covering, and we clarify any concerns you might have on that. So, all right. I will stop the recording.